Precinct Chairman, will you please take a count of your members in attendance? It is now 7:11.
Want me to read this whole thing, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll come up.
And you brought them to the other.
Yeah, I just passed it.
Okay. Yep. Precinct 1. Precinct 1 has 9. Precinct 2. Precinct 2 is 17. Precinct 3. Precinct 3 is 10. I remind Precinct 1, you do have a couple of people that may be sitting elsewhere in the room. Precinct 4. Precinct 4 is 14. Precinct 5. Precinct 5 is 12. Precinct 6. Precinct 6 is 14. Precinct 7. Precinct 7 has 7. Precinct 8. 3. What do we have? Wow. There is a quorum. A quorum is 75. There are 86 people present. Will you please rise and join me in saluting the flag? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'm going to ask you to please stand for a moment of silence. We just recently lost some people who were very important in the town and their families. Jim Noe, who passed away on the 12th, who was on the Council on Aging and very famous for his taking pictures of parades and everything else in the town. And Deborah Sims Beauregard, 56, who passed away on the 15th. She's the daughter of Barbara and Fred Sims. Fred Sims was many years on the Finance Committee and Precinct 8. And my condolences to Barbara Sims on the loss of her brother Tom Halloran and her sister Mary Kelleher. They were a day apart, and it's been a pretty rough 2 weeks for the Kellehers and Sims. And I also want to we'll have a few minutes on that. Oh yes, Arnold Smith, who also passed away. Thanks. I also announced that maybe the meeting will go a little faster, but I say that in jest. Ed DeFelice is in the hospital. He's having eye surgery, which is going to leave him laid up for a couple of months. Do we have any introductions? I do have some preliminary things. We have sitting at my right, Amy Summers, our town clerk, and Joe Fair, our town council. We have our new finance committee officers, and I'm going to go from my left all the way down. Vice Chairman Peter Brown, Secretary John Malley, and Chairman Barbara Ann Zavino, our Town Accountant Bill Rowe. We have our Selectman somewhere up here. Mr. Recupero, Mr. Souza, Mr. McCrisky, Mr. O'Regan, and Mr. Mr. Combs. You know, we see so much of each other, we forget our names. This is a special town meeting, and there are some things a little bit different of this. We are, incidentally, Stephanie Carrara, who normally sits here to hand me notes, is on vacation. She planned it before town meeting. If we have any other special guests, I ask you to please rise. We do have some town department heads here and consultants. At this point, I would like to ask Mr. Recupero, you wanted to speak on something? Bob Cohn, which one? A couple of you guys have asked.
I just want to say a few things. I know he's going to kill me for this. 47 years of service is coming to an end for Stoughton. And I think we ought to stand up and give John Batchelor one hell of a hand for 47 years. Thank you very much.
Also, we have the usual announcements. I do not know whether there's coffee or anything in the back, so everything else is pretty much the same as some of our regular routine announcements, so I don't think those are necessary. Other than at this time, I recognize some procedural motions. Where is Mr. Robert Mullen? This is our famous acceptance of the notification of the meeting.
Good evening. My motion is to vote to suspend the directory rule under the Stoughton Town Charter, Article 7, Chapters 7 through 14, Paragraph B1(3), which requires advisory reports to be distributed to each of the town meeting representatives at least 14 days in advance of a town meeting, and the reports and warrant for the special town meeting were mailed separately on 3 different days. The Finance and Other Standing Committee report and recommended motions on Articles 2 through 10, along with the warrant, exclusive of the entire text of Article 1, were distributed on November 4th, 14 days before the town meeting. The Planning Board also distributed by USPS its recommended text for the new zoning bylaw book on November 4th, followed by a copy of the main motion for Article 1 and errata and requested alterations based on the public hearing comments on November 2nd was distributed on November 13th through the 14th. Draft copies were used at Planning Board sessions held at the Senior Center on October 5th. There was also a session of invited officials with Planning Board on September 28th. Draft copies were available at the November 2nd public hearing with the Municipal Regulations Committee. If there be no objection by 2/3 or more of town meeting representatives, those members present hereby agree that this meeting is lawful and legally before this assembly, having a quorum of duly qualified voting members present at the Stoughton High School auditorium on November 18, 2015.
All those in favor, say aye. Aye. All those opposed? I'll declare it unanimous. It's certainly more than 2/3. Mr. David Mullen.
I make a motion to dispense of the reading of the warrant and return thereof.
All those in favor? All those opposed? Is voted. Mr. Dolinsky.
Based on my prepared script, I move that we limit reconsideration. No motions for reconsideration until after all articles have been brought on the floor.
All those in favor? All those opposed? The motion carries. Mr. Gator.
I make a motion that we act on articles accepting those reserved for specific sessions in order as printed in the warrant.
Since we have no other session, that's almost no, the first, that little paragraph. But that's fine.
Act
does-
on articles accepting those reserved for specific sessions in order as printed in the warrant.
And the specific session is tonight.
It doesn't say that. I read what it.
Oh, no. All those in favor? All those opposed? The motion carries. Mr. Coleman.
Eric Coleman, Precinct 5. I was asked to read this. Request attendance and availability of department heads at town meeting sessions pursuant to Chapter 7, 7-16 of the Town Charter. The members of this town meeting request that all town officers and department heads be in attendance at town meeting sessions to receive questions from the town meeting members relevant to their expertise.
All those in favor? All those opposed? I say it's carried even though we don't really have a very large complement. But part of this is the fact we do not, these people are not residents of the town, many of them, so we have to give them that authority to be recognized. Mrs. Gito.
No motion for reconsideration until all articles have been acted upon, have been heard.
Even though that was done that was done twice, but that's fine. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed. This is what happens when you type over or type over. Ms. Patterson.
I'd like to make a motion after the final vote on Article 10 to dissolve.
Okay, that's when you, okay. All those in favor, we don't vote on that one this time because we're not going to dissolve yet. Okay? It's just to know that when she stands up, put your coat on. All right. I'm going to do, we do have, that will be, I think that's a very good idea that we actually have them go right out in the various reports. I appreciate that suggestion. But somebody may have to remind me. Okay. There are additional material on the front table, a CPC motion for Article 9, a main motion, and a errata from the planning board, and in the back of your finance committee report, there is a lot of additional supplementary information, and what I have just here is a statement from the general fund accounts to answer the questions of how much money we got. And I know they've printed this a little bit on the small side, so if there's anybody has any questions on that, feel free to ask. Mr. Nally.
I'm just wondering, because you don't have Mrs. Carrara here, are we going to use the front row for people to line up like we usually do? Because she's not here to even write down the names for you.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. We do have,
That's a yes or a no?
Yes, it'd be,
Oh, no, they're all here, so I don't know if
yeah. Yeah. Just, that is a good practice that we're getting into. And I dare say, when we get into Article 1, there'll be plenty of time for questions. But let me explain what's, well, this is a sort of, for all of you who have attended the annual town meeting and the way we do the budget, we go through the whole thing. There's an opening motion and a closing motion. And the document that you have before you right now is not a bylaw. It is a draft, and any amendments, the only ruling on scope that I would have, if you're talking about you stray from the subject matter. We're going by section, which is in your index of the draft of the whole bylaw, zoning bylaw. This is now going to be a new book, separate from the other publications, which Mr. Scardino will explain. But as we go through this, there will be presentations from both our, including the planner and the consultant, Mr. Bobrowski, our consultant, building inspector, and anybody else involved with the planning process. I will take each section as shown in the index. So if we say section 3, I will recognize, I'll say section 3, Mr. Scardino will make the motion either as printed or with the errata. Then we will open it up to any other questions regarding that section. Whether and the proper person could be requested to answer it. We will then move, if there is no question, I will consider it as part of already accepted in the main motion. So the erratas, as printed and nothing else is there, I will be checking it off. This is automatic, done without debate or discussion. On scope, I wanted to bring this up because generally, if we increase a dollar amount or something, we've always said we don't allow anything over that. In this case, numbers in these bylaws or draft bylaws are open for discussion, either up, down, or whatever way you want to do it. So we're not restrained on that. I'm going to make anybody who's making a presentation not spend more than 5 minutes, because I know it'll be a very long night. And Mr. Young has reminded me they may have to take and change a tape in the middle to record this. Voice vote. It's only a simple majority to make any amendment to this. Doesn't mean we have to go and treat it like other bylaws, or especially zoning bylaws. It's simply amendments are just saying that you want it or don't want it added in the draft. It does not become effective bylaw until the last motion, that's the errata, which puts the date on the book. And then we will take one standing vote for the entire package, which will have to be recorded, and if it's 2/3 in favor. Of course, there's other things go after that, but for the purpose of this meeting, that's the system. At this time, I would like to recognize Mr. Scardino on the first part of this to explain what's going on.
Mr. Moderator, I move to adopt the 2015 edition of the zoning bylaws of the Town of Stoughton as amended through the November 18th, 2015 special town meeting and the August 18th, 2012 zoning district map together, which have been revised, reformatted, edited, recaptioned, renumbered, restated, adopted, and approved through November 18th, 2015, as being the official zoning bylaws of the Town of Stoughton as attached to the November 18th, 2015 special town meeting warrant. The said 2015 edition of the zoning bylaws of the Town of Stoughton shall supersede all previous publications issued for or by the Town of Stoughton, including the booklet titled Town of Stoughton Bylaw and Map, September 8th, 1970, as amended through May 5th, 2014 town meeting, and also including any and all amendments to the titled Chapter 200 contained in the manual published by the General Code Publishers, known as the Code of the Town of Stoughton, as amended May 5th, 2014, also referred to as the Blue Code Book, collectively known as the zoning documents, and any other documents published as amendments to either of these zoning documents. This adoption shall become effective by a vote of the special town meeting on November 18th, 2015, in accordance with the law.
Second reading. Other than that, that's, puts it on the floor.
Thank you. Before I get into the errata by section, which I believe the moderator has asked for, Mr. Moderator,
Yes.
we're doing the errata by section?
Yes, we are.
Okay.
And
just-
Mr. Town Council says that statement that's on the original form, the statement that we put on the original form that says the errata is part of the motion.
Yes, I was going to,
Okay, good.
yeah. With the package that all of you received, there was the motion continued on with an errata. Just to explain what that was, this was to include, as a result of the public vetting process of this bylaw in an open and transparent fashion, all of the public comments that were received. So we will discuss those by section. But I wanted to go back to the main motion for a second and explain why I referred to two documents. The January in 2006, the town meeting approved a recodification of this book. Unfortunately, Section 200, the zoning bylaw, was not opined upon by the planning board, so the Attorney General rejected it. So we've been running two documents, ladies and gentlemen. This booklet, which most of the attorneys, petitioners to cases before the ZBA and the planning board have used, and this quasi-official document, which, for example, in 2014, we had 4 zoning amendments, 2 of which amended this document, and 2 of which amended this document. So I wanted to explain why the motion was drafted the way it is. Now, to the first section, errata, Section 2.1.1, division into districts, page 3. Insert the following table so that you'll be able to see the changes that existed in the prior description of the districts. There was no errata in Section 1. So that was it for Section 2. Do you want to...
No, we'll start everything. Bring it on the floor.
I'm
Just so
sorry?
that we have a record that we did to talk about it.
Do you want me to go to 3, Mr. Rock?
No, we're going to start right from...
No, I started with 2.1.1,
Well, let's go back to...
and there was no errata for 1.1.1.
No, but at the same time, we have to take what you got in that book and just make sure that we have accounted for it as being okay.
The actual...
In other words, you want to say, you move Section 1 as printed as printed.
I'd like to move Section 1 of the bylaw that was given to you in your package. There was no errata. Okay.
Absolutely. That's exactly what we're doing.
I've read the errata for 2.2. Again, if you're following along in this book right
Well,
here.
wait a minute, just before. Is there any question on 1.1 at all? 1.0? If there is none, there is no challenge. We go on. It now becomes part of the, okay, Mr. Scardino. Section 2.0 districts.
Yeah, 2.0, I've read the errata just to move along. That's what I just read. That we changed to put in a more expanded caption or key so that it'd be easy to read the districts. For those people who've been around for a long time, they know the districts is R30 as opposed to RA. Are there any questions on section 2.0?
No, other than that? If there, I'll ask for that, if there's any questions. All right. There's being no further discussion on section 2.0, which is 3 parts. There is no further challenge. I declare it part of the main motion. Section 3.0.
We have an errata in section 3.2.2, home occupations, pages 6 and 7, to read, the buildings or premises occupied shall not be rendered objectionable or detrimental to the residential character of the neighborhood due to the exterior appearance, emission of odor.
Wait a minute. I'm looking, section 3.0, which is use regulations table. You have a couple of those things.
I'm sorry, 3.1. 3.1.4.
Yeah.
I can't see with the lights here. Mixed use building item under the business provision, page 6, insert business, read CBD, GB, NB, HB, below a PB, 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 PB.
Is there any further discussion just on 3.14?
That's 3.1.4, the use table, which is was separately mailed.
All right.
Now we're back to this, just to try to keep you all on track. 3.2.2, home occupation on page 6 or 7. This came out of the public hearing on October 5th. The buildings or premises occupied shall not be rendered objectionable or detrimental to the residential character of the neighborhood due to the exterior appearance, emission of odor, gas, smoke, dust, noise, electrical disturbance, or in any other way. In a multifamily dwelling, the use shall in no way become objectionable or detrimental to any residential use within the multifamily structure. Refer to section 6.3, environmental performance standards. That's what was added. It was a cross-reference.
Any further discussion on 3.2? Mrs. Camacho.
Okay, you're after.
We'll come back.
The questions will be handled. I should introduce him at this point. Our lead counsel is Mr. Mark Bobrowski, Professor Emeritus of New England College of Law and publisher of the leading casebook on land use in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. So he'll be handling the questions on each section.
Mrs. Camacho.
Roberta Camacho, precinct number 4, town meeting representative. So as I'm reading this for home occupation, the home occupation, you're putting in for number 6, that it shall not be rendered objectionable or detrimental to the residential character of the neighborhood due to exterior appearance, so it doesn't matter what it looks like, emission of any odor, gas, smoke, dust, noise, electrical disturbance, or in any other way. What the heck are we doing in a residential zone? putting home occupations that can have all of these problems? I don't understand this. Why would you permit by right this in a residential zone? I don't understand it. We have now in the bylaw that the residential, the home occupation has to be in the primary structure. There are home occupations and structures in this town by which they are using fences to connect the main home to an accessory building by a fence. And then that is considered to be a home occupation. How can you possibly put this into a bylaw unless I'm interpreting something incorrectly? Odors, gases, doesn't make any difference what it looks like? I have no idea what this means. And I'd like an explanation. I'm sure some other people would too. Thank you.
Mr. Bobrowski?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Thank you, town meeting members, for allowing me to speak. The existing section, which is Roman numeral 11H, governs home occupations. The only thing that's being changed, as I understand it, is the addition of the sentence. This is existing language, and what is being added is in the parentheses, refer to section 6.3, environmental performance standards. That's the sum of the change. The other language is all in your existing zoning bylaw today. So the bolded language, if you have the same handout I'm looking at, which says amendments to the special town meeting, motion for Article 1 special town meeting. If you're following with me on page 2, section 3.2.2, home occupations, 6, the unbolded language is existing, and the language refer to section 6.3 environmental performance standards is the floor amendment, if you will.
Mrs. Camacho?
Oh, yeah. With regard to existing section 6, all of those things are prohibited, not allowed. I should clarify that.
Mr. Moderator, I really need help with this. Why does it say then, if it is in the existing bylaw, that these shall not be rendered objectionable or detrimental to the use of the residential character of the neighborhood? So this is the chance for us to vote this out of the bylaw. So I make a motion that I don't know if it's going to be a proper motion, that we take this out of the bylaw. That we table this until such time as we have some clarification on this. Because we weren't even told at the beginning of the meeting that anything that was not bolded was what was added. We were told that this was the errata section, and these are the things that we were supposed to be looking at that were going to be added or changed. Now, I may not be the brightest bulb on the tree, but this seems to be rather confusing to me. And I certainly don't want these things in my neighborhood. Would you like them in yours? So I'd like to make a motion that we table this until we can get a better explanation of this section that we're dealing with right now.
Do you want to make that table to a time certain, or?
I would suggest that we table it to the point that we have a clear explanation. I'm not suggesting another night, but I think between now and 11 o'clock tonight, someone should be able to give us some clarification. Thank you.
On the motion to table, I don't know whether it's debatable or not, but no, it's not. It's not debatable. So, but I would like, because this is taken out of context. Could you explain, Mr. Borowski, that?
As I said before, Mr. Moderator, The existing language of the existing language of 6, as it's printed on your page, is in the current bylaw. The only proposed floor amendment is the bold language, which is the old a new cross-reference to section 6.3, which tells the reader to look to new section 6.3, the environmental performance standards sections of the recodified zoning bylaw. That's the only change. If you look at the old bylaw, it clearly indicates that it's the same deal. I'm reading from your existing bylaw. The buildings or premises occupied shall not be rendered objectionable or detrimental to the residential character of the neighborhood due to the exterior appearance, emission of odor, gas, smoke, dust, noise, electrical disturbance, or in any other way. In a multifamily building, the use shall in no way become objectionable or detrimental to any residential use within the multifamily structure. I'm quoting from your existing bylaw. The only thing added is the cross-reference.
Well, wait a minute, one person at a time. If you're going to rise to a point of order, please come to the microphone, Mr. Laurie.
If, Dave Lurie, Precinct 6, if we're going to open up a discussion about a modification to one of the bylaws that are existing, wouldn't we naturally then be able to understand the entire bylaw that we're voting on? Because how are we supposed to understand the change if we don't understand the actual bylaw? I don't know. I didn't come here
Mr.
so
Laurie,
well versed on what.
I was going to mention here, if you go into this big thing, it will show you in the context where that really exists. Under accessory uses, 3.2 is accessory uses, and it's on page 18.
I think that the question that came before town meeting was to help us understand what the bylaw for Section 6 is about, so that we understand what we're voting for. It's not, please go to page 27 in the book and figure it out. A lot of this language is very difficult to understand, and I'm just like some people in this room, like the previous speaker, have a hard time understanding the legalese that's in these bylaws. So I think if we're going to vote on something, we shouldn't be ignorant about what we're voting on. That's my comment.
I think that you and Mrs. Camacho are both reading. Mrs. Camacho is still on the floor, and I again ask our consultant has made this point that you should look on the whole context of this, because it is a list of several things of an existing home occupation, all right? And I think it is awkward wording, but that's, if Mr. Fair wants to comment further.
Mr. Moderator, I just wanted to clarify something relative to Mrs. Camacho. I think her Mrs. Camacho, just to clarify, I think when you have to read the two in connection with one another. So the 3.22 home occupation states that a home occupation may be conducted as set forth in the table of use regulations, subject to the following standards. And number 6 says that the buildings or premises occupied shall not be rendered objectionable. So it's not saying that we can allow these buildings to be objectionable. It's saying quite the opposite when you read it in connection with 3.22, the opening paragraph. And so it's the actual opposite meaning, I think, as to what you think. So there's no change in that language. As Mr. Bobrowski has already indicated, it's just a parenthetical.
Yes, Mrs. Camacho.
All right, not to waste anyone's time, what town council has said to us, it seems to me, is that I have mistaken the interpretation and that these things are not allowed in the current bylaw, these things are not going to be allowed in the new bylaw, and that if there are odors or gases or whatever it happens to be, these things are objectionable. If I have the town council's word on that, then I will stand on that word. Is that true?
That's my interpretation of what that is, but certainly it looks like
Oh,
Mr.
I greatly appreciate that. I'm not going to ask for an answer to the other question, but I think home occupation in a structure should be more than a fence connected to another structure. And I think we have to look to the Planning Board and the Zoning Board of Appeals to really enforce the bylaw as it's supposed to be. Thank you.
Mr. Moderator, if I might make a suggestion, I hope you find this acceptable. Because I think people are having difficulty going back and forth between the town meeting errata sheet and the substantive ordinance, or the full color-coded or clean document, which is the full bylaw in front of you today. Perhaps it would be helpful if, as we began this discussion of the section, next one up is Section 4, I could give you an overview of what Section 4 is about. The errata could be read, and then you would understand the errata in the context of the bylaws.
That would be perfectly acceptable.
Is that, okay, so are there, I want
But
to
we
take the
aren't-
meeting away. Are we done with Section 3, I guess would be the question.
Well, no. I do, did Mr. Smith want to? Mr. Hanson? Go ahead.
Point of information, Mr. Moderator, if I may.
One person's on the floor.
Going to do it while he was walking up.
I've recognized Mr. Hanson first, then you, Mr. Regan. Or Regan.
On page 19 of the bound book here, got to get this down to a lower altitude. Section 3.4.1 general, and it says, it's talking about pods, and it says, shall not be visible from the street or any adjacent property. Perhaps that should be adjacent dwelling.
On the tabling, no.
Because every piece of property, unless you've got something resembling 500 acres, is going to, this pod is going to be visible from some property that's not yours. I think it probably should read not visible by any adjacent, from any adjacent dwelling.
Now, where is Mr. Smith? He did have a question on this and a presentation on this very subject. Where's Mr. Smith? You know, the lights are bright here and dull there. Mr. Smith did follow the procedures that we asked. He did submit an errata, or actually an addendum, whichever, on 3.4.1 regarding portable storage units. And I recognize Mr. Smith to do that.
Yes, I went through this, and this is one of the ones that I found. The first one is, it says not more than 3 months in a calendar year. So that would mean that if October 1st, I could put one in and not take it out till April 1st, 2 calendar years. So I want to change that to 6 consecutive months, and that's it. Not calendar years. We'll drop the calendar year and just change it to 6 consecutive months. Why should we put pressure on a homeowner when he needs one of these pods because if he has problems? You know, give him an extra time to get it clear, but he can't have it there forever. So it's just making it less time sensitive and getting away with calendar year. So he could still have it for 6 months under this, but let's codify it to 6 months max. That's the change that I'm looking for. I can see his argument on the adjacent property too, but that's up to you guys to change. But I'd like to have a vote on that and change it to 6 months consecutively. So instead of saying 3 months in a calendar year, it'll say just 6 months consecutively. That's my change.
Is there any? I do hear a second.
Our expert, do you have any opinion on that?
The article, this individual section of the bylaw was proposed by Mr. McGrath, your building commissioner, because of the proliferation of pods and cubes around town. Having just had a stepson move home from New Orleans, I can attest that the ground scars from the cube after 1 year are finally getting grown over at this point. So it's a policy decision. It's not a legal decision. If you think 6 months is better than 3, and if you think from a dwelling is better than from an adjacent property, that's for town meeting to decide.
Thank you. You bet.
Mr. Malley. Oh, just through, Paul.
The only question I have on the dwelling part is, yeah, you can't see it from someone's house, but if you're sitting in your backyard and you got a pod looking right at you, I think that's why they're using property, not dwelling. I mean, I don't know if you want to sit there with your neighbors, got this big pod sitting in your backyard that you're staring at, as opposed to what you normally stare at, another backyard. I think that's why you're using adjacent property, not adjacent dwelling. Because if it's dwelling, then it's only if you're inside your house, yeah, maybe you can't see it.
Mr. Smith, in response.
As I read this section, if it's not visible, it can stay there forever.
Up to 6 months.
No.
Oh, no, yeah, no, I'd read it that way,
If it's not visible, it can stay there forever.
yeah. So this is
Right, yeah.
the visibility.
Yeah, if it's not visible, it can stay there forever, so the 6 months doesn't matter. Right, so, right? So that's a whole other aspect. I'm just saying the 6 months, if it's visible.
6 months, I was talking about the other part, the dwelling versus property.
Well, do we vote on this?
Let's vote on the 6 months.
Mr. Linehan has a question.
John Linehan, Precinct 1. I agree with Mr. Smith's point. I'm just concerned about the language used, actually, because if it's 6 consecutive months and then you have somebody come and scoop it up for a day and take it away, then you can have another 6 months, sounds like.
Any further comment? In this case, I'm going to take a vote on this if you,
Might as well. Let's take a vote the way it says.
I need a motion to move the questions since there's been enough debate. And as the maker of the motion, Mr. Smith can't do that.
Mr. Moderator, if everybody looks at the back of their, second to the last page of the special town meeting motion for Article 1, the small handout, it does have a requested motion to the moderator, 3.4.1, 6 consecutive months. That's already in writing.
But I'm only considering it because it was not this was a requested thing, which Mr. Smith did.
I just asked him if it was his placement in here, and I just want to be sure that you understand it's already in writing. So.
Yeah. So all we have to do is either vote it up or down.
But didn't I make a motion, wasn't it seconded?
I heard somebody second that? I'll restate it, just so that so you're clear. It is on your errata sheet
Only for 6 consecutive months.
in
that's it.
bold
Once you're
sans
within
serif
6, it's done.
face. The statement is to have
You may be right.
section 3.4.1 general read as follows. A portable self-storage unit, otherwise known as a pod, in parentheses, quotation marks, or a box container, shall be allowed in a residential district for not more than 6 consecutive months, unless not visible from the street or any adjacent property. He doesn't want it in any calendar year. That was his. Mr. Hanson.
will the changing of the wording, could we include dwelling instead of property right now, or will it have to be a separate motion?
Where you say, we're talking.
3.1.4, the last word says, or any adjacent property. I'm suggesting it should say, any adjacent dwelling.
That's a
Is that
matter.
going to be a separate vote, or can you include that on this?
Well, right now, I would ask that first, if the maker of the motion would consider that within his intent. Where's Mr. Smith? So, to attain adjacent dwelling, right?
Change adjacent property to adjacent dwelling.
All right. Now, on our consultant, I will ask if he has any problem with that. Mr. Scardino, do you have any? So that's going to say dwelling. And that's now part of the motion. All right. I will restate this, just so that, did I hear anybody cut off debate? Mr. Fallon? I cut off debate. All right. Moved. All those in favor, say aye. All those opposed? This is to cut off debate. No, this is on just this is, it's accepting the errata as corrected. And I'll restate it. I asked if you still want to talk on it, because you just said, no, you don't want to cut off debate. Who else? Mr. Gito. And this is with the friendly amendment, the old-fashioned term.
I'm not sure we're going to get through all this in my lifetime. But I think that we should retain property. What if there were a pod next to a restaurant or something like that? That would sort of make the restaurant not terribly happy, but it's not a dwelling. So I wouldn't mix the dwelling and the time period myself. Thank you.
Any further comment? Okay. Okay. I will read. Now, in reference to Mr. Anzavino's question, is what have I got written here as brought on the floor, and including the amendment? It would say section 3.4.1 general, a portable self-storage unit, otherwise known as a quote pod. I'm trying to talk over people. If I'm talking over people, you'll never hear what I'm actually saying. Please give the courtesy to the rest of the town meeting members. If you're talking, allow them the opportunity to hear what you've asked me to read without interruption. As a pod or a box container shall be allowed in a residential district for not more than 6 consecutive months unless not visible from the street or any adjacent dwelling. That's what I have here is being voted on. Mis- Um, As a courtesy to Mr. Gito and the rest of the body, I think it is to divide the question. So I will go back to the last proposed amendment, even though the petitioner has approved it on the motion, or the motion to add dwelling instead of property. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed? No. I will declare it lost unless 7 people want to stand up. So it's going to remain or any adjacent property. And I got to make a note here. Motion lost. I'll restate it one more time. No? Okay. Do I hear a motion to cut off debate? All those in favor of cutting off debate? Aye. All those opposed? I declare it now ready to be a vote. Everybody clear for what we're voting on? Well, okay. I take it you do, but we'll have it more money before it's done. On the motion to accept the errata change, if you want to call it that, addendum, this will be a simple majority vote. Section 3.41 general regarding changing to 6 consecutive months and no reference to calendar year and not visible from the street or any adjacent property. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? No. I will take the motion carried. Voted. Now, we have, before we get into 4.0, is there any further discussion on section 3.0? Mr. O'Regan.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Did we do anything with the table of uses?
We're getting there.
So when will you get to the table of uses, since I think that's in section 3?
We're following right section by section by section, so we're not going all over the place. So we're still on section 3. If there is no further discussion on section 3, I will declare that the rest of section 3 is all right.
Mr. Moderator, that's what I was asking. The table of uses is 3.1.4, and I have a question on the table of uses.
3.14, okay. Could you bring that? I do not...
It is not an amendment to insert, it's a request to delete.
Still, I will... let's bring it up, because I'm supposed to have a spare page here.
Mr. Moderator, I moved on the table of uses, principal uses residential, item number 10, mixed-use building, to delete that line in the proposed table of uses.
Wait a minute now. 3 point...
Delete number 10.
Okay. Under principal uses? Page 6.
What does N mean? What does the N mean? Oh, second. Sorry, second.
Thanks. I want to delete line 10 on the table of use regulations, principal uses, mixed-use building. Okay, so explain. Well, as initially proposed, This, first of all, we do not now have a mixed-use building provision, as I understand it, in our bylaw. I think it's something we should have, but my own opinion is not now, and here's why. As proposed initially, when the draft came out, the only area where this was suggested was in the Central Business District. We have the Stoughton Center Mixed-Use Overlay District. That allows mixed use under a permit granted by the planning board in certain circumstances. That's the only place that I understand we have it.
Because this is,
The amendment that's being proposed extends planning board to all of the other business districts for mixed use. My own opinion, and I urge you, is, and the crew has done an admirable job on this project. We should be grateful for the work they've done. This goes beyond the idea of this, which is to clean up our bylaw that really needs cleanup. This is a significant policy decision on when, where, and how we want mixed use, particularly on the downtown. To allow mixed use in the Central Business District now, before we get to the South Stoughton Center Mixed Use Overlay District deal, and before we receive and consider the work the Redevelopment Authority has been doing on the downtown plan. It would be truly unfortunate if we change this zoning now, while this work is being done. And one of the concepts here is to figure out what use goes where in the downtown and have it come out right. Okay? So what I can see happening is this gets adopted and somebody applies and gets a permit to put a multi-use, mixed-use building in some place where, when we're done figuring out what we want, isn't where we want it. That's what we would do. All right? We would do that, except let's not. So for this time, I think let's pause on this and allow this mixed use to come back when we deal with the Stoughton Center Mixed Use Overlay District and when we have more opportunity to figure out on the other business districts, particularly neighborhood business district, what and where we want in those, and not just change it on the table of uses. That's my reason for asking for this. With no disrespect to the hard work of the folks who put this together, I just don't think we are ready to make this kind of policy change of this nature on the document that's supposed to clean up the bylaw. Thank you.
wait a second. Ms.
Hi, good
O'Toole.
evening. I know how confusing this is, but if people brought their envelopes with them, I send that out in the mail, and you could follow along a little better. And if people want a yellow line copy, I do have those, if that's easier for people to look at. But I want to deal with item number 10, mixed-use business. At this time, we looked at the whole bylaw comprehensively, and we know that we'll probably really deal with that issue, mixed-use business in Phase 2. So as a committee, we have no problem deleting that at this time, and we can look at that at a later time. But I think it will give the town members, if you look at your zoning map, you can go out and actually go look at these districts. And when we come back with that, and we propose moving some mixed-use businesses in other areas of the town, you'll know exactly where they are. And this correlates to the zoning maps. So at this time, I'm speaking for the zoning workshop group. We have no problem taking that out of the bylaw right now.
Any further? Move the, before? Yes, yes. Please come and identify.
Lifelong resident. I oppose that motion. I think that we have a planning board in place to make these decisions. I think that is wise, and it is a good route economically for this community. That provision, there's a lot of people that would be affected by that. They might not be here today to be represented And I think they can represent themselves and their interests at the planning board. And I think that is the best avenue to go. Thank you.
Mr. Recupero?
Was on the subcommittee that looked through this bylaw. The reason why, I tend to agree with the sentiment. The reason why, there are other issues to get through. This is a bylaw that was presented, or this is an amendment that was presented in two stages, or is going to be presented in two stages. This is stage one. And between now and the spring, when we hope to come back with something more substantive, or even in a year, I don't think there's anything that's going to really be affected by that change. There are other things that we can argue about that are more important to the article presented. Thank you.
Mr. Parolin?
Richard Parolin, Precinct 1. The changes that are being made to the CBD district is going to go under the planning board. The GB district will be under the planning board. NB district is under the planning board, and highway district is under the planning board. My problem is neighborhood business. A lot of these lots are partially built now, and they're very small. And there's a lot of people that live right in that area, and I'm sure they don't want these things in their backyard. So consider your friends, your neighbors, even maybe some of your relatives live around these little areas, and they shouldn't be there, especially neighborhood business. Thank you. Vote no, please.
Vote yes for the amendment? Okay. So, you know, when it's yes mean no and no means yes. Now, any further comments on this? Do I hear a motion to cut off debate? This is just on that removing number 10 mixed-use building.
That's number 10.
What's that?
Motion to word the question. Move the question.
I will, the motion was to delete table of use regulations, principal uses, item 10, delete that whole.
Mr. Moderator, it should be A10.
A10? Oh, I'm, okay, I'll start again. And it's on page 6. Page 6. Table of use regulation, principal uses, A residential, item number 10, the last one on that list, on that page, wants to be deleted in its entirety.
Just the one question, the one statement that I have is it's under 3.1.4, and it's the section 10 on page 6 there for everything.
So you want to even, okay. All right, I agree with you. 3.14. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. All those opposed? No. All right, there's doubt in the mind of the chair on this question. All those in favor, please rise, which is to remove it. This is just to remove it. It's only going to take them. Precinct 1. Precinct 1 has 9. Precinct 2. Precinct 2 is 6. Precinct 3. Precinct 3 is 2. Precinct 4. Precinct 4 is 7. Precinct 5. 4? Precinct 5 is 4. Precinct 6. Precinct 6 is 1. Precinct 7. Precinct 7 is 2. Precinct 8. Precinct 8 is 2. All those opposed, please rise. Precinct 1. Precinct 1 is 2. Precinct 2. Precinct 2 is Precinct 2 is 10. Precinct 3. Precinct 3 is 10. Precinct 4. Precinct 4 is 10. Precinct 5. Precinct 5 is 7. Precinct 6. Precinct 6. Precinct 6 is 12. Precinct 7. Precinct 7 is 9. A 5. Precinct 8. Precinct 8 is 1. What do we got? By old-fashioned mathematics and a pencil and a pen, the motion yes is 33, no 57 is lost.
So what law?
It stays as is.
So it stays as it is.
Is there any further discussion on section 3? Any other? Then we're going, there being no further question on anything else, section 3.
Mr. Moderator, just a question on the table of use regulations.
Yes.
Are we going to approve that now, or can we come back to that? After we get some, we go over the definitions, like, my concern is this flexible development. I just don't want to approve the use of regulations regarding that without going into the definition, descriptions, and some questions on that. So can we come back to this at a later point?
I would put that under the notations of reconsidering it.
Okay, I just want to make sure we don't approve the whole table. So what are we doing?
Mr. Gito,
I'm sorry, Mr. Gito.
Could you allow Mr. Gito make his comments?
Sure. I'll stand aside.
Mr. Gito, could you officially make those comments before the mic? Oh, this is a terrible mic. Mr. Gito, could you come to the microphone and explain why you would prefer to do it right now?
When are we going to come back to it? I mean, if what we need to do, it is in Section 7. And so that will come back and bring this in. And then will you, so we're not, pardon me, who do I ask the question of? Through you, Mr. Chairman, to Mr. Bobrowski.
Could you put it into the microphone?
We're not approving the table now? Is that what I'm understanding?
No, I consider it in here.
Maybe I can clarify with Mr. Moderator, as I understand it, the table is a part of Section 3. To the extent that there are any further questions on the table, they should be raised now, because once we move on to Section 4, we'll have bypassed the table. So that's
correct.
The gentleman that I was just talking to had a question about flexible development. That's a new entry in the table. We're sort of talking on the sidebar here. Flexible development replaces your old open space residential development, largely because it didn't work. And you can view the terms of flexible development under Section 7 of the new bylaw.
Does that satisfy your question, Mr. Mullin?
Well, again, if we're gonna, I'd rather not approve this table until we get into these definitions, so we all understand what we're approving in the table of use regulations. So,
Mr. Moderator, I have no problem with holding the table of uses until the very end, once we've gone through the entire bylaw, and then moving on it at that point. I think it's a fair question the gentleman's raised.
So you want a table, further discussion on table of,
I'll make a motion to table the discussion on the table of use regulations until we get to the end of all the definitions that are included in the table of use regulations.
after definitions.
Okay, I'm sorry, after Article 1? At the end, at the conclusion of Article 1. Thank you all for your support.
After we come to the last section of the sections, all right? All those in favor of tabling? Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. The motion carries to table till after Article, whatever section that is.
11.
Section 11.
May I go on to Section 4, Mr. Moderator?
Okay, Section 4.
Okay.
Yes.
So let me give you a general overview of Section 4. I thought this was close enough. How does it come out of here? Okay, can you hear me? Section 4 is your dimensional and density regulations. If you're looking at the color-coded version, you can see that there are only very minor changes made to Section 4. For example, old references to open space residential development have been replaced with a reference to flexible development. The dimensional table does not change anything. There are no new districts. There are no new lot sizes. There are no new frontage requirements, no new setbacks, no changes to building height. None of that has been changed at all. We did modernize things like height exceptions. We added solar panels, hardly controversial. We made references to multifamily being constructed for affordable purposes or for elderly purposes under federal and state law. So those are the sum of the changes that we've made. Now, there are a couple of amendments that are in your handout, and they're basically this handout that was named a motion for Article 1, Special Town Meeting, November 18th, 2015. Let's call it the errata sheet. Okay? Okay, well, this is the errata sheet. Well, we can call it 1. I'll call it 1 if you'll call it 1.
Okay, document 1.
You can see in document 1 on the second page, there is one errata, error, to be corrected. And all it is an amendment to the table of dimensional and density requirements. There is a note, and it just adds the requirements of section 6.1.7, which have to do with parking, shall apply. Apparently it was omitted, now it's being reinstituted. That's all. That's the only change to section 4 from your existing text, other than the minor changes which I've already outlined.
I'm trying to find something on here.
Yes, it says just below 3.2.2 home occupations, you'll see without much of a break, section 4.0 table of density or dimensional and density requirements.
Evidently.
And that's the only change in the document 1 to section 4. That's it. Otherwise, it is as written in the main motion.
I have something different here. I have something on my workbook here. It says Section 4, Table of Dimensional Density Requirements. The original table and density requirements will be reinserted with one correction at the bottom under the lined area. Number 3 shall read 3. The requirements of section 6.1.7 shall apply.
Yes, that's the only change to section 4. It's just, the dimensional table is a freestanding document at this point because you can't put the tables in until the vote takes place. The tables blow up the text. But the table hasn't changed. We're just putting back in a footnote, if you will. That's it.
There's no further, there's no challenge beyond that.
Move the question.
All those in favor? Gentleman in the back. Mr. Ventresco.
Peter Ventresco, Precinct 8. I don't know, it's a lot of confusion here, going from one book, black and white, to a colored pages. I'm sorry.
Come a little closer to the mic.
I would like to know one thing about these. I don't know if this brings it in. For old neighborhoods where most of the houses sit on small lots, like 10,000 square foot lots, and when they pass these, I'm just trying to make a point here. When they passed the 1.5 acre lots years ago, that's fine on new development, but I don't know if this pertains to what I'm going to say.
you're
In old
talking-
neighborhoods. The next section? Oh,
Section 5, not section 4.
okay.
Save that for section 5. I don't want to. On the question, make the correction on section 4, table of what's that? Oh, okay. The original table and density requirements will be reinserted with one correction at the bottom of the under the lined area. Number 3 shall read as follows. The requirements of section .1.7 shall apply. That's the only change. It's a footnote. All those in favor? All those opposed? I will declare that's part of it. Now we'll go into section 4.0.
5.
5.
Mr. Moderator, Section 5 is the section that pertains to nonconforming uses and structures. There are no errata that
Yes, for information. No. We tabled the use regulations.
Table was table? Not the use.
Dimensional.
Different table. No, the gentleman's question
We
was.
tabled,
No,
we
I-
just tabled 3. We just approved the one correction on section 4, and there are no errata. And if there's any questions on section 5.0, any part of section 5, you're welcome to bring them up now.
Let me tell you what the
We tabled that.
No, we tabled the table of uses, Mr. Moderator.
Table use.
That's a
regular-
different table. I think the table of dimensional and density regulations, as per the question raised by the gentleman, has been approved. It's the same as the one you have today, so, okay? It has a slight amendment.
Certainly, Mr. Gito.
We're not reconsidering. We're not reconsidering.
We just voted on it.
No, we voted on the one little thing that he said. We didn't talk about this. There's no way I'm voting for this.
I'm very sorry to do this. But if we are, thank you. if we are taking the insert on page 6, no, I'm sorry, that's the wrong one. Good Lord. I've got the right one. If we have the insert on page 9, if that's the one we're talking about, it is wrong. But why, what is this thing here that says? Oh, sure. I'd just love to have you do that.
It's confusing because the motion was sent out to all of the town reps. And there were some mistakes found within the public hearing process, and there were some amendments that were suggested by people at the public hearing process. So the handout that you received from the planning board with the motion, that was the errata, and on the back of that were all the new inserts. I reinserted the old table. And in the package you received at home, Lou, that has the old table in the back. I backed up all my information. I took it from the yellow line, and I put the originals back in. The only change on that table was to make it consistent with the new bylaw. On provision 3, I changed it to 6.1.7, so it would refer to the new bylaw. But in this section that I mailed out, that is, you would have seen the new table, it was attached. And I wrote a notation that we were reinserting the old table. And that's the last piece of information you would have gotten from the planning board with the motion. So we are reinserting the old table that's in the original bylaw.
Thank you, Noreen. However, we got 2 pieces of information a couple of days ago. One which is correct, which is the one that apparently Noreen is referring to, and one that was incorrect. So as long as we're dealing with the correct one, I'm a happy camper. Thank you. Just to be clear, on the insert on page 9 that we got somewhere in this package, it had 2, at the bottom of the page, it had 2 things that said I in it. And the last I is correct. The one above that either should have been HB or it should have just been under HB. That's the point that I was trying to make. Thank you.
And that's why we reinserted the old table, because of that error, and also to fix provision 3, which would be 6.1.7.
Now, I'm thoroughly confused. Are we on section 5?
Yes.
4.0?
5 is
I
where
thought we
we're
took
headed.
care of 4.
Yes? Okay. Section 5 rewrites the existing bylaws provisions for non-conforming uses and structures. It literally deletes everything in the existing bylaw and replaces it with new, modernized provisions that take into account all of the changes in case law that have been rendered since 1992. I think the practical effect of new Section 5.0 is to make it easier for people who have a non-conforming house, a non-conforming structure, to change it. For example, if you look at Section 5.5.1, permissible changes, this only applies to your house. If you have 1, 2, or 3 indented there, you don't even need to go to the Zoning Board of Appeals and ask for a building permit. You can instead do this, and ask for a special permit. You can instead do this by a building permit. Marguerite Mitchell, member of the Board of Appeals, was on the committee that drafted this, and we agreed that this would not only get the Board of Appeals home earlier, but it would also make it easier for the average homeowner to do business with the town under the zoning bylaw. I think that's the most significant change. There's also a provision in here for teardowns, and that provision is in Section 5.7. It's a conservative provision. If you want to knock down the existing home on the lot, it probably applies mostly to homes, but it also applies to pizza parlors for that matter. If you want to knock it down and rebuild, if you build the same thing again, same footprint, same volume, God bless you, good luck, here's your building permit. If you want to move the footprint or you want to make it bigger, you need a special permit. The third major change is that if you don't reconstruct within 2 years of a catastrophe, or you simply abandon the building, so you don't use it for 2 years, or you abandon, you can ask to bring it back. Sometimes that's a good idea. I rezoned downtown Holyoke 10 years ago, and if you didn't put this provision in their ordinance, there would be no artists and live-in in the downtown because those buildings have been abandoned for 120 years, let alone 2. So it's a question that can be raised at the Zoning Board of Appeals, and if they decide that it's appropriate, they can give a special permit for that. I think the most important thing is that this entirely is consistent with a number of cases, 7 or 8 different cases that have been decided by the Appeals Court and the Supreme Judicial Court since 1992, as I said, and I think it's going to make your life easier. I've put this in the bylaws and ordinances of better than 50 cities and towns at this point, and nobody's calling me up to complain. I think you're right. First, there's always a first.
Hi, my question is, in these old neighborhoods where the lots are non-conforming, but there's a lot there that conforms with the neighborhood, but you can't build there because it doesn't meet the requirements of acre and a half. The acre and a half lots is fine for raw land and a development, but I think it's unfair for the old neighborhoods, the thickly settled neighborhoods, if people own a house and it's on an 11,000 square foot lot, which was down the street from me before, and there's an adjacent lot that was handed down from generation to generation, then it becomes a big problem because they can't build there because it's not conforming. So what can we do with that situation?
Well, there is a state law. I always like the opportunity to quote it. It's General Laws, Chapter 48, Section 6, Paragraph 4, Sentence 1. It says if you have 5,000 square feet, 50 feet of frontage, your lot was separately owned on the day it became nonconforming, and it's available for residential use, you can build a house there forever and a day. But that's what the state law says. If you want to write something more liberal to administer this locally, this is not the night. It's confusing enough as it is, and that's something we can consider in Phase 2 if people are serious about doing it. There are a number of towns who have more liberal local provisions, but that's the state law. I don't trifle with it unless you want to come up with something on your own.
Any further discussion on Section 5? All those in favor of moving the previous question, say aye. All those opposed, motion carries. To move the previous question, all those in favor say aye. All those opposed, I would declare it unanimous majority.
I'm moving on to question 6, Mr. Moderator, or Section 6?
Yes?
Okay, Section 6 is your general regulations. For the first time, we've put together things everybody has to live with: parking, loading, signs, landscaping, and performance standards. For the most part, it's what's in your bylaw today. We didn't change any parking calculations or driveway widths or anything of that sort. We did add a more liberal provision for shared parking. These are mostly for commercial enterprises. We did, and I want to point this out as an important change, we did at the end of each of the things I just mentioned, parking, loading, landscaping, signs, and environmental performance standards, we added a provision that allows by special permit you to come to the planning board and to ask for an exit. For example, if you were to build a new factory and it required 120 parking spaces, but you thought you could get by with 70, and you can ask the planning board to consider that by special permit, they can reduce the parking to 70. Otherwise, you're going to overpark, it's going to cost you more money as a business, and you would otherwise need a variance in order to get out of that requirement. A variance is very tough to get. You have to show soil conditions, shape, or topography of the lot. I want a smaller parking lot because of soil conditions or topography. It's not going to work. Special permit is a jump ball. Is it good or is it bad? If it's good, you get it. If it's not, you don't. So I've added that as a special relief mechanism with the committee for every one of those performance standards. This is a business-friendly idea, and I hope you'll approve it, as many other towns have. Now, there are a couple of errata that apply to Section 6. The first one is to the parking table. which is section 6.1.6. The parking table is a freestanding document, but it's incorporated by reference in section 6, so you're considering the parking table as we speak. And all of the amendment says is add a reference to the town meeting vote for off-street parking spaces in the central business district, town meeting April 24th, 1978, Article 53. It's just a reference, that's all. The same thing is true as you turn over what we're calling document 1 to the next page. Same thing. It's another reference to the CBD zone, same town meeting. There's a change to section 6.1.7. All it does is add a reference, refer to section 6.1.3, computation of spaces. And there's a couple of other changes that are below that that are basically along the same lines. So there's just, for example, the last one's 6.2.2 with regard to signs, shall not exceed 2 square feet. Somehow the word feet got omitted from the, you won't pick that up with spell check, so somebody picked it up in the planning board public hearing. So all of the changes that are proposed in document 1 to section 6.0 are simply errata or references added to the tables. Nothing substantive is contained in any of these amendments.
Yes. Please give your name.
Deborah Sovany, Precinct 4. So my question with regard to the special permits, which are throughout this section, is I'm concerned that the special permits actually take the teeth out of the bylaw. And I would also think that having these regulations, particularly with regard to conditions, aesthetics, et cetera, that actually that would be considered business friendly, because if you're going to put money into your business, you want to know that the guy next door or down the street is going to be following the regulations and the bylaw. The second concern I have in the question is just why there seems to be a shift in the special permitting authority from what I thought resided with the Zoning Board of Appeals to the Planning Board. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll take the questions in reverse order. It's Planning Board special permit because all of the people who use this section of the bylaw, section 6.0, parking, loading, landscaping, signs, and environmental performance standards, are businesses that are going in front of the Planning Board for site plan approval. Your site plan approval is pretty all-encompassing. I didn't change the applicability or eligibility of that. So rather than have to go to the Planning Board for the site plan approval and then go visit the ZBA for the special permit, why not let the Planning Board wrap the special permit into the site plan process? That's the answer to the second part of the question. The first question, and I agree with you that it could open the door if used improperly. Knowing what your planning board has been engaged in here recently, I doubt that will happen. I view it more as a tinkering mechanism than I do as a, oh, let's just gut the parking table. A good example that I experienced in using this in another town, Holbrook nearby, was with a garage. It's the first property zone commercial as you come from Randolph into Holbrook. The proponents were two brothers who have an auto body shop. They have 2 other employees, 4 bays. The parking table said, give us 40 parking spaces. You don't need 40 parking spaces for that. 25 will do. It wasn't just a wholesale dismissal of the parking standards. It was a fine-tuning of the parking standards. That's what this has in mind. Obviously, you have to trust your board to administer it properly, but that's a question that I leave to you.
Mrs. Sovany.
So here's what I consider the problem here is that when you have a really good planning board, you're like set to go on this. At some point in the future, if you don't have a good planning board, what this does is it seems to take the teeth out of the whole point of what we're doing now. And I would suggest that the special permitting sections or be taken out of this. Thank you.
Specifically, any other questions? I'm going to ask these things to be put in writing because it's very complicated, and we're trying to record this.
So you get it right up.
Okay,
So you would want to make a motion. Why don't you get a pen?
yeah.
You want to move to delete section 6.1.7. No, I'm sorry, 6.1.8.
Okay.
6.2.7. 6.3.12. And 6.4.9.
Okay.
Okay, that's it.
All right.
Yep.
So I'll do this properly. I am making a motion to delete section 6.1.8, 6.2.7, 6.3.12, and 6.4.9.
Read them
I'm sorry.
slowly.
That became 6.1.9, okay?
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. A motion to delete section 6.1.9, 6.2.7. Okay, somebody says there was a typo, okay. 6.3.12 and 6.4.9.
All right, now.
Go ahead.
So that would delete the special permit relief mechanisms for respectively parking and loading, signs, environmental performance standards, and landscaping.
Now that you've made that list, there's two confused people up here. Well, there's three. All right. I need that list up here. Yeah, I have nothing in writing, and I... Because there's been changes and corrections in these numbers, too, so... Six point. Yeah. I got that. 6.3 or 12, yeah. 60. And 6.4, 4.9. Delete all of them. Okay. Any discussion on that? Mr. Laurie.
David Lurie, Precinct 6. I respect the thought about relaxing certain regulations that maybe a small business might benefit from. We're going into a period of time in Stoughton where we're going to be asked to accept a lot of debt service in the town. We're going to be taking on a lot of votes that increase taxes. We're going to need as much stimulus as possible from the business community to come in and find Stoughton as a friendly place to do business. We have confidence today in all the people that are doing the planning, the people who are giving us consultation on how to do it. If we could stimulate the economy while we have confidence in the people who are running the town, I think we should be friendly to business to encourage business to come. And when things in the future should go bad and Stoughton gets concerned about the people not doing a good job at it, look, every time we do votes, it's a work in progress trying to make the town better. We have plenty of opportunity in the future to vote the regulations back in that get things back under control. So let's take advantage of the people we have, the confidence we have, stimulate the economy, make it a little easier for us when we're trying to grow this town. And we'll worry about the problem years when those face us. That's what I believe. That's how I'm going to vote. Thank you.
Mr. Scardino.
Thank you, Mr. Lurie, for those comments, but I'd just like to say that these are tools that the planning board needs in order to balance out certain projects and certain things that the town would like to see come in. And we've got 3 projects in the square right now that would be built already if certain changes that are coming about tonight were adopted. And your planning board has done nothing but bring you things like the master plan, this zoning bylaw, which was a year, the master plan, which was 2.5 years, brought on budget. So if you want an indication of the track record that the planning board has done for this town, I would suggest that that's a pretty good record to run on as far as the planning board, quote, running roughshod. So these are tools that we need in order to do our jobs, to look at businesses and say, you know, the House of Brews may have one requirement, but Cumberland Farms or another type of national chain, Sonic, we just had Sonic come through. And these developers, these aren't easy hearings. They don't want to do what we want to do. They don't want to landscape. In some cases, we go through 3 public hearings just on landscaping. We've got a motel going in on Page Street. The Sonic, as I just mentioned, when you see these projects come in, they're going to be attractive and make this town proud. And so we would appreciate you voting against this amendment and give us the tools that we need. Thank you.
Any further discussion? I've heard the motion to move the previous question. All those in favor of moving the previous question, say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries. On the vote, that is to delete sections 6.1.8, 6.2.7, 6.8.3. I got to write bigger. 6.3.12, 6.4.9. On the motion to delete, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? No. It is lost. Any further discussion on?
I've finished my presentation on Section 6, Mr. Moderator, if there are no other
Please
questions.
do. Please do.
Here it is. This just came in this afternoon. Yeah. Yeah, this is a change we got in. I'm sorry, I was supposed to do this, and Mr. Bobrowski did it. Yes, I agree with you, Mr. Gito. So that will be part of the recommended changes to 6.1. It was just a. It now should read in 6.1.4. There needs to be a said shared parking agreement shall be recorded. We just added the word shall. So there's no question that it's optional. It's mandatory.
Are you doing this on something that we already have printed, or?
Oh, this was a late addition.
I'd like to have it in writing.
He's ready.
All right, I don't like doing this. 6.14. There needs to be a shall instead of the last two. We're going to have notes all over the place. 6.1.4, and shall, last line, last line of paragraph. Well, I don't have, this is, I consider it a one-word thing if everybody understands where we're going. It's just adding a word shall, and if it's properly recorded as here, all those in favor of allowing that shall to be included, say aye. Aye. All those opposed, I consider it a vote. I know we sound like we're getting picky, but it is a reason to be picky. Mr. Bobrowski.
Are we ready for section 7, Mr. Moderator? I can't, have we done 6 vote?
Well.
Okay. Okay. That's what I asked.
All right, I'm going to ask, if there's no further questions on section 6, let me go back my first. You do. And anybody else with a question? Mr. Smith. Section 6.
Section 6.2.3, subsection 5, page 33.
Section, one minute now. Again, what, 6 point what?
2.3, subsection 5.
2.3, number 5. Okay. Everybody get on the stage.
All right, I put in an amendment on the size of the sign. Currently, this says 40 square feet surface area. I'd like to change it to 50, which is 7 by 7. Nice round number. It's an arbitrary number from what I can see. And since this is for the businesses, I think we should give them a little bigger sign to invite them in. It's not a huge difference, but it is a difference, and it has to be voted on. And that's it. So I move that we change the 40 square feet to 50 square feet. That's the only change.
And this was on your printed errata. Is there any discussion? I heard a second. No further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? No. I'll declare it a vote unless 7 people want to get a standing count. It's voted.
Well, do we have to vote on 6 first?
Okay. Everything else in section 6, I will declare section 6 as printed with no further exception, changes. Okay. Section 7.
Section 7 talks about special regulations that are residential in nature. The first major change is that the old cluster residential bylaw has been deleted in its entirety and replaced with something called flexible development. Flexible development is an alternative that may be chosen by the developer. It's not mandatory at all. If they want to do a conventional subdivision, good luck. Comply with the subdivision regulations, you're good to go. You don't have to do flexible development any more than you had to do cluster residential development before this. We think it's a more flexible tool. It allows the developer to go to a 0 lot line. It allows the developer to, for example, shorten up roads. The developer is given the opportunity to put from 1 to 3 dwelling units in a building. I don't know if any of you are familiar with Cannon Forge in the town of Foxborough, which you access off of Mechanic Street, I think. But it is a fabulous development. You can Google it online. It consists of 1s, 2s, and 3s in a building, and it's got prices in the range of $400,000 to $500,000. at this point. It's marvelously developed. There's over 300 units in there. That's the model for flexible development. You don't have to build 2s or 3s. You could make it all single-family homes, shorten up the roads, make it into a cluster. Your old cluster residential development was largely outmoded because it's prescribing that the developer build Billerica. It has big lot requirements, not a cluster at all. Cluster should be close together. We just did a development in my town called Concord Riverwalk, where the houses look, they're basically from me to Joe. And the developer thought he could sell them, and in fact, they sold like hotcakes. There's 13 units. It's an old-style village cluster around a common area with gardens. If that's what a developer thinks he can make a buck at, it's a very good product. You'll be proud of it. It's a special permit, so if you don't think the developer's trying to do with get away with anything but shorten up the road and save a few bucks without adding any amenities to the town, planning board just says no. That's the essence of flexible development. The rest of the Section 7 is pretty much what you have today. We did clarify some important features in the temporary additional living area, also known as your accessory or in-law bylaw, apartment in-law bylaw. We basically clarified that. Conversion of residential structures to non-residential is the same, and we added a provision on bed and breakfast. So if you want to do a bed and breakfast, you can have up to 3 guest rooms on site plan review. You can have 4 to 10 on special permit. And the model was based on Lenox, which is the capital of bed and breakfast. That's it, Mr. Moderator.
And I see that we do have 2 small errata
Sorry, I forgot.
for 7.1.
Yes, there are a couple of errata in document number 1 on page 31. The words "but not limited to" are added to 7.1.4.4, and in 7.1.9, the phrase "predominantly wood siding" shall be deleted, and the provision will read, "The architecture shall be residential in character, providing gabled roofs, an articulated footprint, and
Yeah,
varied
I think
facades."
one of those should say gabled instead of
Yes, I think it
cable.
should say, instead of cable roofs, it should say gable roofs. Spell check can only go so far. And those are the principal features of Section 7.0 and the changes. The gentleman had some questions on flexible development. I hope I answered them.
Yes, Mr. Mullen.
Bob Mullen, Precinct 2. Just trying to kind of wrap my arms around this new type of development here. You just mentioned 0 lot line? Yes. So you're saying that, can you kind of define what you mean by that? You mean you don't need any frontage, or?
What I mean is that the developer is free to do this, the developer is free to do this as a condominium with detached units, if that's what they choose to do. So as I said, the houses can be, in Concord Riverwalk, the houses are as close as from me to Joe. If you've got an iPhone, Google Concord Riverwalk right now. You'll see what the developer did. It's literally this close from me to Joe. And there's a horseshoe arrangement. So that means that the current defect with your cluster residential development is that I think it requires a minimum of 15,000 square feet, or it's district by district. Well, it's a 15-acre minimum eligibility standard, but what do the lots have to be within it? 20,000 square feet. As I said, that's Billerica. Billerica's not a cluster development. That's the essence of the problem. Nobody's using it. So if you give a little bit more flexibility to the developer, he doesn't have to choose it. He can go conventional. And we don't have to approve it. We're just trying to create some incentives for the developer to do something better, leave some open space, have a more varied residential development style. If you don't like it, say no.
Well, let me ask you the question again to the planning board, whoever can answer this. If the planning board says no, doesn't have the right, developer have a right to appeal it to a court?
Yes, but yes, they do. Any special permit can be appealed by a disgruntled developer, but if the planning board has a rational basis, think about those words, rational basis, then the planning board's decision will be defended by the judge. The judge does not have the power to substitute his or her decision for that of the planning board, as long as the planning board has a fairly debatable, that's what rational means, a fairly debatable reason to deny the special permit. And I just argued this in front of Judge Piper 2 days ago. City Council of Pittsfield denied the special permit. We had 3 grounds: traffic, neighborhood character, inconsistency with the master plan. If the planning board has those on its side, it wins.
Getting back to the 0 lot line, there's no minimum lot acreage required at all?
No. Well, to come into the application process for flexible development, the minimum tract size, this is just to be able to apply, is, I'm going to look it up again, I lost it. Is it 5? 10 acres.
10 acres?
10 acres.
Okay, so the minimum is 10 acres to have.
Just to be eligible to make the application. But you
okay.
can divide that 10 acres up using 0 lot line into the number of homes that you would have been able to get if you followed all the rules of conventional subdivision, wetlands regulations, and other Board of Health requirements. And then onto that, you add the 10% that are asked for affordable units. So if you had 20, you still get 20. 10% affordable makes it 22. You're going to adjust the lot lines to accommodate the 2 affordable units. The affordable units are not getting subtracted out of the 20. They're being added into the 20. We're trying to encourage people to do this. If you subtract them out, they're taking a loss of better than $500,000 because they're losing 2 market rate units.
Okay. Are you going to be talking on this? Okay, that's all right now. Thank you.
Mr. Scardino.
Just to fill in, the one cluster that you can all point to is in Ash Street, the new development that went in there that Mr. Souza and Marguerite Mitchell live in, if those of you who know where those people live. Mr. Bobrowski is correct. There's nothing, if you drove down that street, you could pinch yourself and say, this looks like every other subdivision. What this bylaw allows the planning board to do is to require for a developer to shorten up the road, to put units close together. We're going to want to see things like a clubhouse, a dog park, a clubhouse, some sort of a swimming pool or other recreational facility. This is not going to look, when you drive down the street of a cluster under this bylaw, you'll know that it's different than what you've seen before, but not like a series of apartments stacked on top of each other. It's the purpose of the bylaw is to give the planning board the tools in order to say, you can do that development, but we want you to do X, Y, and Z, and not have to dance into a court necessarily or to know that we win if we have to go into court.
Ms. O'Toole?
I think what people need to understand in a flexible development is the first step is they come to the planning board with a preliminary subdivision plan. And they subdivide the land in a preliminary style and say in this particular subdivision they can build 15 homes. And then they decide, well, you know, we'd like to try this in a flexible style. They cannot build more than 15 homes. The only thing that gets increased is 10% of those 15 homes would be affordable. So say that's 2 units. So on this piece of land, they'd be developing 17 homes. Cluster development doesn't mean on the 10 acres that we're developing 300 homes. That's not how it works. They come in under our subdivision control law, and if they want to develop a traditional subdivision and you can only build 10 homes, that's what it becomes in the cluster. But in addition to the 10% affordability, which would add, say, 2 homes to it. It's not that we're saying on these 10 acres, you can, with no lot lines, you can build 200 houses. That's not how flexible development works.
Mr. Murphy?
Peter Murphy, Precinct 2. One of the questions I have is 7.1.11, roads. The principal roadways serving the site shall be designed to conform with the standards of the towns. That's all that statement should say. And the reason I say that is we've had many developments come into the town. A developer will put in a roadway without sidewalks, and then they go and they want to change the use of the area 5 years later because they're not selling property, and they don't have sidewalks. I don't want to see a development come in without sidewalks in it, so they must conform to the town's standard, period.
I take your point, I don't disagree with it. If a developer couldn't sell the flexible development for some reason and they wanted to do something else, they'd have to come back and modify the special permit, which would give the planning board another opportunity to address your question about sidewalks.
And also a public hearing because it would be a major modification.
Well, yeah, any modification to a special permit of that magnitude would require, it's like a new application. It would require a new public hearing. So you'd be able to catch them on that end of things. But I think you're right, town standards are fine.
The issue with that is, once you start putting the foundations in the ground, once you start putting the houses or the structures too close to roadways, there are no rooms to add sidewalks. So what I would like to do is modify this to stop where it says, conform with the town standards.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Period. Delete the rest of the section.
Just the sentence.
Right, in other words, we don't want, for it to be private way adequate for intended use, yes, at the time they can do it, and that's what they've done.
I get it. So you want to put a period after that.
Period.
That's it. You got it? Mr. Moderator, the gentleman proposes to put a period after the principal roadway serving the site shall be designed to conform with the standards of the town.
Period.
Period. Delete the rest of it.
Wait a minute. Which one is it, 7.1? 7.1.11. Just the standards town, period, right? You're crossing all of that stuff afterwards, right?
Take it out.
All right. We first said 710, 7110,
It's just 11.
just 11. You were going to go,
Put a period after town, cross everything else out.
okay.
Taking it out.
7,
Take it out.
okay, let me,
They have to build it to standards of the town.
Right, a private way, they still have to maintain that themselves. But it has to be built to the standard of the town. Later on. Thanks.
I just want to make sure we got it totally recorded here. See, one line, it says, the principal roadways, I do not do shorthand, serving the site
Just yours?
shall be designed to conform. I'm just making sure I got it all recorded somewhere here. To the standards of the town. Period. All of the stuff is taken out. Did I hear a second on that? On the motion, is there any further discussion? Okay, that's basically why I'm writing this down. Section 7.1.11 shall read, roads, the principal roadways serving the site shall be designed to conform with the standards of the town, and all that other stuff is gone. It's just period after the word town. Makes it much easier. It says everything in one sentence. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? No. I declare it a majority vote by voice. Okay, where are we? Any further discussion on section 7? We have some of these small, yes.
I'm not sure you understand what you just did to that section of that article, but the way that I'm reading that is that they have to be designed to conform to it, but they don't have to conform. And they don't have to be up to standards to be accepted by the town. And they cannot remain private ways. It doesn't say that anymore. You just took that all out of there.
Right.
I find it very difficult to sit here in a meeting and after the planning board has had multiple hearings and multiple events and stuff to go over here and get to town meeting and micromanage this whole thing. On 4 different pieces of paper, we're trying to go back and forth, and I think it's a very convoluted way to do this, and it should be in one document, and that's it. I think we're wasting a lot of time, and we are liable to make mistakes that we're going to have to change at another time.
As somebody who's been working with this thing for a whole week, trying to figure what's here, I'm very sympathetic. However, since I have to be here and we're here, we've been called to do it. Any further questions or statements on this, section 7? There being not, we have some of these small.
I think we covered.
Did we cover these?
Yes.
These little other ones?
Yes.
I didn't see. One, procedures. That's 714. 719, predominantly wood siding.
Yes.
There's no challenge on that. Gable roofs, I'm just going over my, therefore I will declare that the rest of section 7 is now part of the main motion.
I'm on to section 8, Mr. Moderator.
Fine.
And section 8 deals with special topics. I know a special topic is always adult entertainment. I have no intention of changing what you currently do, but your bylaw is deficient for constitutional reasons today. You are not entitled to regulate adult entertainment directly as speech, because in order to do so, it is protected speech. You can agree or disagree, but that's what our Supreme Court says. You can't regulate it directly unless you have a compelling reason to do so. You don't. So what you have to regulate is the secondary effects of adult entertainment, which typically would be crimes to person, crimes to property. So instead of saying we want to regulate the speech, you have to say we want to regulate the secondary effects of the speech. Your bylaw was deficient in that regard. I added a standard thing that says that. That's all that that addition is. You also have to, by statute, include a couple of provisions that are on the next page, page 40. In no instance shall the board issue a special permit of anybody convicted of violating Chapter 119, Section 3, or Chapter 272, Chapter 28. And secondly, the statute says you can't see any of this stuff outside the windows, and you have to put that in your bylaw, and you didn't have it in your bylaw. So long story short, I did the right thing and made your adult entertainment comply with state law, constitutional principles, and nothing more.
Could we,
it's 49, I'm told.
could I make a request? Is there a short title for that chapter of the and verse of the state statutes?
The state statute.
Is there a title to it, just so that?
Yes, it's Chapter 48, Section 9C. I think it's 9C that deals with adult entertainment. But it's mostly the defect that you had in your existing bylaw was mostly under the U.S. Constitution. which protects speech under the First Amendment having to do with adult entertainment. So this has been true since the 1970s, and it's not going to change. Yes.
Please rise. Go to the microphone. This is being recorded for government examination.
Section 8.1.4, paragraph 1, says adult entertainment establishment may not be located less than 750 feet. Should it be shall not be located less than instead of may?
Either or. It's all special permit. We get it. That's what your comment says. None of these facilities can, adult entertainment facilities can be allowed except by special permit. Sorry. Earth removal, fast order food, these are existing provisions in your bylaw. 8. We are on 8. Let me just say that there are no errata for section 8.
Mr. Morton.
I just ask a question, and it's sort of a legal question. If there is an existing adult entertainment establishment and somebody establishes a public or private nursery school, daycare center, kindergarten, elementary school, or playground or church next to it, does it force the closure of that existing business?
My understanding of the statute, which allows for special permits for adult entertainment, is that they have to be renewed annually. Do you see this at the Board of Selectmen? Okay, I would check the statute. I don't have the statute with me this evening, but effectively it would make it non-conforming, and it would have to take its lumps if it was an annual renewal provision.
Any further discussion on anything in Section 8? There being none, I declare that there's been no challenge to this, and it is a part of the bylaws.
Mr. Moderator, Section 9 is special districts. So you have an existing aquifer protection district. It needs a lot of work, but I did recodify what you have. All it really does is say for the uses that I've enumerated in Section 9.1.2, you're prohibited. There's a modern state template that DEP has issued for aquifer protection. You're likely to see a better version of this in Phase 2. Wetlands, flood hazard, and watershed districts, we toyed with the idea of eliminating that and just substituting a flood hazard district. There are some amendments to this that bring the maps up to date. These were provided by your town engineer. That's the only change. Section 9.3 is an overlay district for the Stoughton Center. Mixed-use overlay district, we had major changes for that. We're going to bring them in Phase 2. The only substantive change that is in SHMOOD, as we call it, Stoughton Center Mixed-Use Overlay District, is the reduction of parking spaces required from 1.5 per dwelling unit to 1. That's it. It's in the table of parking requirements in Section 9.3.15. And the second change was we reduced the number of affordables required from 20% to 10, 20% being darn close to a 40B, 10% giving more incentive for redevelopment. Those were the two changes in the SHMOOD. Section 9.4 is your wireless, no changes. Section 9.5 is marijuana, no changes, but there is a floor amendment proposed by someone in the House to delete it. I'll let them deal with that on their own. Section 9.6 is solar power, no changes. Section 9.7 is floodplain overlay. This was as recommended by the town engineer, no changes.
I have something here about 9.
And there is one errata. It's a minor change in Section 9.6.1. On should have been of. That's it.
Okay, at this time, I recognize Mr. Smith for 9.5. withdrawn. Okay. That being said, is nothing else on 9 point?
That's
Mr.
it.
Zamian?
Oh, here comes question.
Mark Zemanian, Precinct 1. I'm a little confused, so you're going to have to bear with me. But I would like to make a motion to change on 9.3.15 the reduction of parking from 1.5 to 1 and bring it back to 1.5. The reason for this is a number of reasons. The first most glaring reason I saw, and I'm hunting it down here, on page 28, which is in section 6, specifically 6.1.6, we have a table of off-street parking regulations for residential uses. In there, single and two-family dwellings need 3 parking spaces for each dwelling unit. Multifamily dwellings require 2 for each single-bedroom unit, 3 spaces for each 2-bedroom unit, 4 spaces for each 3-bedroom or more unit. I understand this is schmood, and we're trying to attract developers to this area, but we already have a serious parking problem in the town center now. So my question to you is, if we are looking to attract young professionals to this area so they can take the commuter rail, easy access, how many young professionals do you know that own 1 car? I know a great many, despite my age, and I will tell you they all own their own vehicles. So we are likely to have 2 vehicles come in with these 2-bedroom units. With that said, where do you put the second car? This may be something we could look at if the infrastructure of the town center was improved upon or changed, but as it stands right now, we simply don't have the affordance without the infrastructure to change this from 1.5 to 1. So I am asking for a motion on 9.3.15 B to change the number from 1 space per 10 units, 1 space per dwelling unit to 1.5, back to where it originally was. Mr. Moderator?
Okay, I just want to find a place in it.
Especially since we didn't vote for it last time. I will second that motion. I agree 100% with him.
Now, can you just, if you've got the big text, I'm looking on page, is it page 74?
Especially because town meeting voted it down last year. So we voted it down last year, and now they kind of slid it in there. A little mad about that. Maybe we weren't going to pay attention.
Okay. On the motion, I think you've already prefaced, but if you have any further question, I believe somebody has.
I'm here to provide some more background and context to the parking question.
Please identify yourself.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. My name's Kathleen McCabe. I've been a consultant to the Master Plan Committee, and I've been asked to provide some background and context about parking regulations as part of downtown revitalization. My firm worked with the Master Plan Committee and many of you on developing the downtown strategy for revitalization. One of the things that your current regulations in terms of your overlay district for the downtown and the central business district, which is a fairly conscribed district, does say the proposal is for 1.0. This is a common practice in terms of downtown revitalization to decrease the minimum parking requirements. There is no maximum threshold being proposed. So if a developer feels that from a market conditions perspective, they can provide additional parking, but they must provide the minimum. One of the things that's important to know is if you look at the current census data on the parking and vehicle availability for households in the 3 census tracts that are part of your downtown. In terms of 1-person and 2-person households, which is the type of user you want to attract for whether it is young adults, millennials, or for empty nesters, those are 1-person and 2-person households. The existing 1-person and 2-person households tend to have 75% of them have either no vehicle or 1 vehicle. So you already, in terms of your households, do not have demand for 1.5 parking spaces. You only have demand for 1 space. So when you average those other households that have 2 or more cars, your current households don't require a requirement for more than the minimum of 1 space. So that a couple other reasons, we did do a survey, an inventory of your existing parking spaces in your downtown. The master plan recommended better parking management, but you do not presently have a capacity problem. You are trying to attract investment and attract activity. Parking lots, to be honest, do not attract activity. You need to have active uses. And part of active uses is having residential development to strengthen your market in and around the downtown Stoughton and Stoughton Center. So having a singular parking space makes it easier to have infill housing development in the concentrated area around Town Hall and the train station, the train depot, Wyman Street, that area right there, so that you want to have that. When you're like 3-4 blocks away, the SHMUD is no longer covering that, so you do have the single family and 2-family and 3-family where you have the higher parking requirement. I also want to say that the downtown strategy and the town's negotiating strategy with the Mass Department of Transportation in terms of depressing South Coast Rail calls for a parking garage. So having a parking structure will be, if you have more development and more investment in the future, the strategy is to provide for a parking garage. That was something that was really pushed by the town leadership so that you would have demand for that. But in the meantime, we need to get to the point where we have a parking problem. You might occasionally have not the ideal parking space that you're looking for right in front of the post office or right in front of a takeout place, but within 100 feet or 150 feet, you have parking. So most people would say that you do not have a parking problem, so that going to 1 space per residential unit will not create a parking headache at this point in time or in the near future. So the master plan supports convenient parking, shared use parking, and a district-wide management strategy for parking, and part of that would be a reduction of the parking requirement to stimulate private investment.
Mr. Scardino.
We have right now two projects. One, it's already permitted, that would have been built on Morton Square if this parking requirement had already been in place. And the big hole that everybody in this town has been talking about would have been up today. There would have been a ribbon cutting early in the fall. So I would behoove you, we're trying to fix the square, help the planning board, move the town forward, reject this amendment.
I heard somebody say to move the previous question. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Previous question has been moved. On the proposed amendment, which is to change section 9.3.15, paragraph B, dwelling units, should change from one space to one space per dwelling unit to 1.5. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? No. I'll declare on a voice vote that is lost.
That is it for section 9, Mr. Moderator.
Okay. Okay. Section 9 is done. All those other little things. Section 10, administrative procedures.
Section 10 is the job descriptions that your local boards and officials have in administering the zoning bylaw. With regard to the building department, nothing has changed. There's been preservation of all of the existing provisions in the bylaw. Board of Appeals, I slightly reworded the section to eliminate repetition of the statute. You can get the statute from the statute book, and it's pretty straightforward. There is no current job description or reference to the planning board, so we added a very brief section delineating what the planning board does and how it does it. Section 10.5 on special permits is largely rewritten, mostly so that we could add better criteria for how these various boards make their decision. The decision-making criteria are in 10.5.2. They're the very same criteria that we used in Dedham to permit Legacy Place, and I've used them in a number of different communities over the past 30 years. They really work. So this is very clear instruction to the applicant, to the neighbors, and to the board how they're supposed to make their decision. And the rest of it is pretty straightforward. Section 10.6 is site plan approval. The applicability standards are the same as they were before. We had changed it, but at the recommendation of the first work session, we brought it back to what it is today. You'll see some changes in development impact report, in a traffic study, in a stormwater management report. Those were suggested by your town engineer, and we added them in as a courtesy to him. The last two sections, section 10.7 and 10.8, are new. Section 10.7 deals with site plan review for Dover uses. Dover uses are churches, schools, and child care facilities. They have a special status under the statute. You can't treat them the same as everybody else under site plan approval. You can, however, impose reasonable conditions towards their development. And all the site plan review for Dover uses is designed to do is to get that out on the table so that the board can make a decision. And then lastly, I've had a lot of experience over the past couple of years with people seeking reasonable accommodations under the disability statutes. This primarily has to do with facilities for recovering addicts for drugs and alcohol. They are protected under the Federal Fair Housing Act and the Americans with Disabilities Act. You better have all the stuff you hear in the newspaper about opioids and how there needs to be more treatment centers. There needs to be some way to handle this. Otherwise, you're just throwing it in the lap of Mr. McGrath. And it really should be a community decision, which this makes it. It brings it to a board instead of to the building commissioner. So those are the major changes to Section 10. There are no errata for Section 10.
Okay. Is there any further? Mrs. Camacho.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Roberta Camacho, Precinct 4. On Section 10, under variances, it's 10.3.3, and in the proposed bylaw, the formal proposed bylaw, not any errata pages or anything, I'm on page number 99. Number 1 says appeals, number 2 special permits, and number 3 says variances. Now, in the original bylaw that we had, the original bylaw, it says before any variance is granted. You see, this is where I get confused, and maybe you do too, is that whenever we've had a town meeting before and we've changed bylaws, we've always had to have the existing bylaw in front of us, or the existing law in front of us, whatever it might be, general law or zoning, and then we would have to have the change so that we could see exactly what it is, rather than juggling around 4 documents with errata pages and everything else. But at any rate, the point being is that in order, it says before any variance, this is what we have now, is granted, the board must find all of the following conditions to be present. And they pretty much follow 40A, Chapter 40A. I don't happen to have a section of Chapter 40A with me tonight. That's the state law, the state zoning bylaw. Before any variance is granted, they have to meet these conditions. Conditions and circumstances are unique to the appellant's lot, structure, or building and do not apply to neighboring lands, structures, or buildings in the same district. B, strict application of the provisions of the bylaw would deprive the applicant of reasonable use of the lot, structure, or building in a manner equivalent to the use permitted and made by other owners of their neighboring lands, structures, or buildings in the same district. Letter C, the unique conditions and circumstances are not the result of the actions the applicant has taken subsequent to the adoption of this bylaw. And D, relief, if approved, will not cause substantial detriment to the public good or impair the purpose and intent of this bylaw. Now, under the new proposal, on page number 99 in the formal edition that we have, number 3 is supposed to substitute for all of what I've just read. It says variances. To authorize upon petition or appeal with respect to a particular parcel of land or structure thereon, a variance from the terms of this bylaw, where the Zoning Board of Appeals specifically finds that owing to the circumstances related to soil conditions, shape or topography of the land, or the location or structures especially affecting the land or structures, but not generally the district in which it is located, a literal enforcement of the provisions of this bylaw would involve substantial hardship, financial or otherwise, to the appellant or petitioner, and the desirable relief may be granted without substantial detriment to the public good and without nullifying or substantially derogating from the intent and purpose of the bylaw, use variances shall be permitted. And prohibited rather, excuse me. So, in other words, anything goes. A variance will be able to be permitted before any variance is granted. The board must find all of the following conditions present. So under the new section, the board doesn't have to do that. They don't have to find A, B, C, and D for granting the variance. It doesn't say that. So in other words, it's open season. You can write anything you want in a bylaw, but if a board is willing to vary the bylaw, then anything goes. If you look around the town of Stoughton, anything has gone for many, many years. So the point that I'm trying to make is that I'm wondering if the elimination of all of the conditions as set forth, I believe, and we have experts here, which I am not an expert in this, for these other conditions, which I read from the original that we have right now, they're in 40A. I'm hoping that we're not straying too far from the intent of the state law, which is 40A, and we can't do anything in conflict with the state law 40A. But it seems as though we're loosening up the criteria for a variance to the point where just financial hardship would be plenty. I can't make money, I need a variance. Do you want it that way? I certainly don't want it that way. So I would like to have the conditions put in again. The one A, B, C, D, and D put in again, so that the conditions have to be there before the variance can be granted. So I would make that motion. Thank you.
Now, you'll have to provide us a copy with all of that detail, that, Mr. Bobrowski.
Mr. Moderator, in response to the speaker's points, first, if you have a color-coded version of the bylaw, the old language is indeed on a strike-through basis on the previous page, all of the language that was read by the speaker. Second, your existing zoning bylaw is a bastardization of Chapter 48, Section 10. These are not the words of the statute. Third, what she's objecting to was lifted from Mass General Laws, Chapter 48, Section 10, blocked and pasted off the internet into your book. It is the precise language of the statute. So for those three reasons, I would urge you to defeat the suggestion.
I don't see any on this. Mr. Morton. Mr. Morton.
I am in general agreement with the previous speaker, and so I have a specific question.
Which previous speaker?
Is the standard in the existing bylaw before this amendment, is the standard illegal, or does it not conform to Massachusetts law?
I think that it does. Chapter 48, Section 10 doesn't give towns local autonomy or deference in rewriting it. The state law is the state law. You have to comply with Chapter 48, Section 10. There is no variation on a theme here. Stoughton can't make up its own rules for Chapter 48, Section 10 variances. What I've given you is the language exactly from the statute. And it does contain the multiple part test that she was referring to. First, there has to be a unique soil shape or topographical condition not common to the district generally. Second, you have to show hardship, financial or otherwise. Third, there has to be no substantial detriment to the neighborhood. And fourth, there has to be no derogation from the purposes of your bylaw. That's the statutory test. Your existing provision wanders off and starts talking about a level. If you have the color-coded version, you'll see it doesn't maintain consistency. You can compare the two side by side on the pages here. So you have to stay with the state law here, and for that reason it was stricken, and you have the new version, which is the state law. It is verbatim the state law. The state law also says, I'll add one more point, that unless you specifically say that you can authorize use variances, you can't do it. So let's be clear. You don't authorize use variances in Stoughton now, so the very last sentence says use variances may not be authorized. That's the only option you have under 4810.
Is that in this bylaw, in this revision, that the use variance may not be authorized?
Yes, it's the last sentence. Use variances shall be prohibited.
All right. And then I take it is your view that the old law was not legal under the statute?
It is my view, because your current language says conditions and circumstances are unique to the appellant's lot, structure, or building and do not apply to neighboring land structures or buildings in the same district. That's not what the statute says. The statute says not generally in the district in which it is located. Those are the precise words. You're making it up. Don't make it up. Let the state law control. That's a cardinal rule of zoning. It's tough enough to figure out the state law, let alone what you have, and I don't think you can deviate from the state law, at least in this section.
Mrs. Camacho.
Not to prolong this, obviously, but the point of the matter being then that I think we have just been told that we have not been in compliance with the state law with all the variances that we have been granting. So, which is it?
I make no attempt to categorize your past actions on variances, whether they're legal or not. If they were challenged and they successfully withstood a court challenge, they're legal. All I'm saying is that the words in your existing bylaw do not mimic the statute. The statute here is not something you can change, and unless you put in the words of the statute, it's wrong. That's the bottom line. So I've put in the words of the statute. And you have town council sitting on the stage. You don't get to make this up. Special permits, you can say, we're going to give it to you if A, B, C, D, E, F, G. That's all local control. Variances are not.
And that was, but I don't have in writing exactly all that specifics. And I do not have it in writing, so basically I'm going to... Okay.
Thank you, Roberta.
Thank you. And on Article 10, then I made...
Are we ready to go to 10? I'm sorry,
Yeah,
11.
10.
11.
Actually,
No, 11's definition.
we have all these other...
11's definition.
We mentioned before all the things that we do have on the sheet, to the best of my knowledge. Section 11, definitions.
Yeah.
I declared that there's been no change other than these things that are here, so therefore the only challenge. So I declared that it's...
Section 11 speaks to the definitions. The definitions, I'll just tell you which ones are new definitions. I think that's probably the easiest way to handle it. Child care center, donation box, electric charging station. This would be for newfangled cars that I'm never going to own. Family daycare home large, family daycare home small. Funeral home, general service establishment, greenhouse, historical association or society, lodging house, manufacturing, medical clinic, motor vehicle hourly rental, light service, vehicle repair, and vehicle sales. That's 4 separate motor vehicle definitions. Nonprofit day camp, nonprofit recreational facility, personal service establishment, power plant, principal structure. Power plants, by the way, were prohibited. research facility, retail, retail large and small, school-age child care program, and that's it. One of the warehouse and mini warehouse. Those are the changes to the definitions. The other ones are the existing ones. One of the most important things we did was take all the definitions out of the various sections of the bylaw and put them all in the back. So aquifer protection had a lot of stuff, floodplain had a lot of stuff. We put it all in the back, so it's like a glossary now. If you want to know the definition of something, you just hit the back of the book, and there they are. They're not mixed into the text anymore. There was one definition that had an error. Under solar power overlay district, it should say for the purposes of section 9.6. What did it say before? It said 9.3. We changed it from 9.3 to 9.6. That's the only definition that's in the errata sheet. Thank you.
And I would declare that that errata is part of this. Mr. Murphy.
One definition that is not in here is kennel, whether it be residential or commercial. We do not define that.
There is a state law that defines kennels. So it's, I can't remember the number of it, but it's 143 maybe? I can't remember, but there is a state law. I use it, when I do put in the definition, I use the reference to the state law.
Also residential, if a household has more than X number of dogs?
I believe that's the case.
I will look that up.
No, I think it's commercial kennel that it defines, not if you just like a lot of dogs. This is with outside customers.
Right. What I'm looking for, it was when a residential house has in excess of 2 dogs, the house should apply for a kennel license.
I'm looking it up, so if we can go, I'm going to
Again, I'll tell you what, in light of time, in light of what's going on, this is going to come back for another revision. I would like to see that in there.
Okay.
That's all. I'll move on. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Delansky. If you want to stand right now and have each precinct tell me how many people they got, I believe you're right, and I'll declare that you stand for quorum.
Yeah, but when was that from?
We don't have,
That was like 2 days ago.
I'm still here. I'm still here.
Precinct 1. Precinct 1 has 11. Precinct 2. Precinct 2 is 17. Precinct 3. Precinct 3 is 9. Precinct 4. Precinct 4 is 9. Precinct 5. 5. Precinct 5. Precinct 5 is...
You got more than 5.
Wait a minute. Let's start again. Let's make sure we have your abacus. Precinct 1. Precinct 1, 11. Precinct 2. Okay, precinct 3. Precinct 3 is 9. Precinct 4. 15. 1, 5. Precinct 5. Precinct 5.
Where's Eric?
He had said 12. 12 was the number you just gave.
Where is Eric?
Precinct 5 has 12. Where did Mr. Coleman go?
9 now?
Precinct 5 has 9. Precinct 6. Precinct 6 has 9. Precinct 7. Precinct 7 has 8. Precinct 8. Precinct 8 is 4. How many you got? Cool. got 80, we have 82 present, a quorum is 75, if I'm not mistaken. Okay. Let's keep going. Yes. I should be cranky. Yes, the quorum, we have a quorum is 82 present, a quorum is 75. Therefore, we will continue on definitions. All right, now we asked, before we went too far, after definitions, we were supposed to
Go back to the use table.
go to the use table. Well, I don't know, we put it in the wrong place. And then we brought this on at 10:08. Yeah. Yep. All right. On the issues of this table of density, dimensional, and, no, section 3, I got things on the wrong page myself. Table of use.
Why we go back to section 3? What happened to section 3?
All right. Table of use regulations, and we started. If there's any questions other than what we already did. All right. That starts on page 6. We go to page 6 in the full text of this bylaw, proposed bylaw, draft, whatever you want to call it. Any questions on any part of the table? Has anybody got any questions? Mr. Parolin? Okay.
Richard Parolin, Precinct 1.
While I'm at
On
it, precinct
page
7,
6.
I need your attendance records.
On page 6, number 10, I like to keep it as printed in this book and not any other changes. Page 10, number 10.
That's the
page
one.
6.
We had it already.
No, you got to change. Keep it as is.
Yes, there's no, so his question is to leave it as you have it printed. This is page, it's actually, it's called page 7, but it's really on, it's say, let's go.
Let it go, we already said.
I would call it page 6, but
Let it go.
it's page 6. It hangs over to in the binding. It's page 6, table of use regulations, principal uses, A, residential, number 10, right at the bottom of the page. Mixed-use building. Everything, we tabled it. Now, I would like to have a motion to take this off the table. It was, yes, it was. It was tabled. It's taken off the table. All those in favor of taking off the table, say aye. Aye. Good, it's off the table. Now let's get down to the business. Mr. Parolin made a comment that he would like to have this remain as printed in the whole shebang kit. Okay. As is. Right. Any discussion on that? Why? Because somebody proposed to change that. Mr. Murphy. We were going to actually they tabled the whole thing about table of use regulations, number 3, section 3. Well, because there were things in the definitions, that's what they wanted. That's why we tabled it, because want to know things about flexibles and whatever. Anybody else have any further questions on the table? Mr. Coleman.
Mr. Moderator, if we don't have any amendments to make any changes, why don't we just go on and vote the article?
I'm just asking, this is the last shot on 3. If there's been no further, it's going to just take a majority vote. All those in favor of leaving the entire table of use regulations for section 3? Anything that was on?
The motion was to leave leave section A10, which is mixed-use buildings, as it is printed in the warrant. That was the motion. As composed to the errata, which changes it to PB, PB, PB in the CBD business, neighborhood business, and H highway business.
Is that? All right. That was right.
So it's a contest now between what's in document 1 and the gentleman's.
He wanted to take out this mix.
He wanted to take it out altogether.
Yeah.
What it currently reads is printed is you have a PB in this area.
Yeah.
What the errata sheet is showing is they want to also have it in these 3. So what I think the motion is to leave it just as it's printed in the warrant and not go by the errata sheet, which is different from what Mr. O'Regan was doing. which was to take it out altogether.
No, but we didn't, so
So this is
this is what we voted to leave in there, is that correct?
we tabled this, and what the motion maker is making right now is to actually not do this, but to leave it like this.
Okay, so you're, as to further confuse and refuse and diffuse some of this, as you recall, there was, the first errata had the change to add and include on this paragraph, this section, 10 mixed use. I know what it is, it's the different typefaces we're using. On the table, we were going to add PB to general business, to neighborhood business, and highway business mixed-use building. That's what was done on errata for section 3.1.4. Now, if, since we had voted that originally, I mean by consent, I'm going to put that as the term, is it your intention? This is a case of, if somebody want to make a motion here for reconsideration at this time, because we're still on the subject, to revisit the motion, the errata that was for 3.1.4 table of use regulations that was previously discussed. That was on your errata sheet. So it was under, we didn't specific, we tabled all
Mr.
this
Moderator,
stuff.
point of order, please.
Mr. Feaster.
I think where we're at in this particular matter is what's before us is the entire Table 3 is before us with which the use regulations with the errata in it, which for that particular provision, that mixed use in residential with, for PB, PB, and PB under the 3 sections. That's what's before us at the present time. The previous speaker's offer of a change in that was an offer. I didn't hear a second, so nor did I hear a motion. So I think what's before us is you asked for us to withdraw the motion to table. That was voted favorably in terms of the table. It is back on the table for us to consider that use regulations in
That's
Table
correct.
3. So that's what the vote is, and if that's the case, I move that we approve the Table 3 as written with the errata that was presented by the Planning Committee.
Do I hear a second? All right. If there's any further discussion on that, if there being none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? No. I heard one vote, so I consider it a majority vote. And a majority voice vote, so therefore, that errata stays in there.
If I may,
Mr.
Mr. Moderator, if I can
Thank you.
be recognized?
Yes.
I move that we adopt the entire zoning bylaw as presented this evening and voted in each of the sections previously.
Well, we have, before we do that, we have one little technical thing here, is two things, actually. We have to do section 12, which is it's not there, but it says zoning map. And I would like to make a conclusion here, or a statement, and I hope
I will withdraw
council-
my motion, Mr. Moderator.
Almost ready to do that. Where it says zoning map, the map included in this document is for illustration. The reference map is dated as of August 18, 2012, for the purposes of adoption of these bylaws. The map has not been reviewed for designation changes or boundary delineations altered by vote of town meeting during the past 10 years, or after August 18, 2012 to November 18, 2015. So the statement here is whatever map we are now using is still the map, and this is only for reference. And that's why it's included here in the packet, that in the future, sometime will be changed, but it's not part of the agenda for this packet. The next thing is I have to accept one more thing from the chairman of the Board of Selectmen, Mr. Scardino. There's one more very, very important change. It's on the bottom of the errata list. It's not the errata. It's the front cover. It's the magic number.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. In order so that the confusion that I showed you initially with this book and this book, that henceforth there will be one book with this date of this meeting on the cover, and that's it. We won't have any confusion about this book and this pamphlet and any amendments thereto. That is it.
Now, make the statement. It says on the front cover what we do. This is the magic moment.
Adopted November zoning, Town of Stoughton, Massachusetts zoning bylaw and map. Adopted November 18th, 2015 special town meeting.
Just all that, yeah, okay. Just, that's fine. All those in favor of accepting that errata? Fine, that's there. Now, on the final motion, which I'm going to have you restate it, Mr. Scardino, and you may just use the simple form.
I'll try to do that commercial like they do on WBZ with all the legal jargon. To adopt the 2015 edition of the zoning bylaws of the town of Stoughton as amended through the November 18th, 2015 special town meeting and the August 18th, 2012 zoning district map together, which have been revised, reformatted, edited, recaptioned, renumbered, restated, adopted, and approved through November 18th, 2015. As being the official zoning bylaws of the town of Stoughton as attached to the November 18th, 2015 special town meeting warrant and as amended this evening. The said 2015 edition of the zoning bylaws of the town of Stoughton shall supersede all previous publications issued for and by the town of Stoughton, including the booklet titled Town of Stoughton Bylaw and Map dated September 8th, 1970 as amended through May 5th, 2014, and also including any and all amendments to the so-called Chapter 200 contained in the manual published by the General Code Publishers, known as the Code of the Town of Stoughton, as last amended May 5th, 2014, also referred to as the Blue Code Book, collectively known as the zoning documents, and any and all other documents published as amendments to either of these zoning documents. This adoption shall become effective by a vote of the special town meeting of November 18, 2015, in accordance with law.
Okay, we had a second way at the beginning. As this requires a 2/3 vote recorded, all those in favor, please rise, and the chairman take account in your respective precincts. So, precinct 1. Precinct 1 has 11. Precinct 2. 17. Precinct 2 is 17. Precinct 3. Precinct 3 is 8. Precinct 4. Precinct 4 is 12. Precinct 5. Precinct 5 has 7. Precinct 6. Precinct 6. Precinct 6 has 9. Precinct 7. Precinct 7 has 7. Precinct 8. Precinct 8 has 4. All those opposed, please rise, and chairman take account. Precinct 1. 0. Precinct 1 is 0. Precinct 2. 0. Precinct 2 is 0. Precinct 3. 1. Precinct 3 is 1. Precinct 4. 3. Precinct 4 is 3. Precinct 5. Precinct 5 is 1. Precinct 6. Precinct 6 is 0. Precinct 7. Precinct 7 is 1. Precinct 8. Precinct 8 is 0. 20, 37, 47, 48, 48, 16, 11, 27. 75 yes, 6 no. It is adopted, and it is now 10:25.
Thank you very, very much on behalf of the committee that's worked over a year on this project.
Thank you very much for your patience with us this evening. We appreciate it.
I also thank everybody for their patience. Hopefully, the next 10 things I would love to have in 10 minutes. Done in 10 minutes. All right. I just have to turn the right page.
No, we're going to go through these 10 things. I'm not coming back.
All right.
Vote for these 10 things.
All of these things. No. Okay. Here we go.
All right,
Article 2.
Article
I
2.
call on the
I think they're all
chairman
empty.
of the Finance Committee.
Where'd Joe go?
Now, just we want to remind you, unpaid bills require a 9/10 vote. Okay, that's all I'm going to say.
910.
Mrs. Anzavino.
That the town vote to appropriate the sum of $6,393.95 to pay the following unpaid bills from the prior fiscal years and that to meet this appropriation, $6,393.95 be raised in the tax levy.
Any discussion? If I would say to pay the bills as printed in the warrant, included in that.
And to pay those bills that are printed in the warrant.
That's on advice of counsel. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? I would declare it's unanimous. Otherwise, I will take a recorded count. I don't think you'd like that. And that is now 10:28. Article 3, Mrs. Anzavino.
That the town vote to appropriate the sum of $282,217 to supplement fiscal 2016 department budget expenses listed within this article, and that to meet this appropriation, $82,878 be raised in the tax levy, $184,803 be raised from the fiscal 2016 water department revenue, and $14,536 be raised from the fiscal 2016 sewer department revenue.
Any discussion? Mr. Dolinsky?
You know, I'm looking at this thing, and I see there's an IT director. That's a new town position. I'm not in favor of that, but I'd like to know what these other buyouts are, and what's the reimbursement on the Muddy Pond. So if somebody can explain that, I'd appreciate it.
Who's going to speak on that? Mr. Hartman?
Yeah, those of you should remember this summer we had a watering ban, and the Muddy Pond reimbursement is in order to eliminate the watering ban. The Board of Selectmen, acting in their role as water commissioners, decided to have the DPW petition the DEP to do a bypass of the Muddy Pond well. That bypass cost approximately $145,000. It was paid for out of the Water Department operations budget, which means the Water Department will be short the $145,000, and that's why we're amending the budget. The buyouts are for three very critical positions, one of whom you applauded tonight in DPW is buying out, are retiring. And those three positions must be replaced. They're too critical to not replace them. Typically, what we would do when somebody retires is we would not replace them until the cost of their buyout, which depends upon which union you're affiliated with or what your contract says, because there's a buyout of vacation time and some sick time. Typically, we would not replace those people until that money is recovered over the course of the year. These three people absolutely have to be replaced. And therefore, it's necessary to replenish those budgets.
Any further discussion? Mr. Gator?
Dennis Gator, Precinct 3. How real is this number, $45,000 for an IT director?
That number is based upon the recommendation of the school superintendent and the director of IT. This is a position that will be assigned to the town. given the current demands of the IT department, which is part of the school and not the town itself, they have not been able to service the town side's needs as well as they would like to, and therefore they have asked for this position. The position will actually report to the IT director, who again is a school department employee, but will be dedicated to the town, and the $45,000 represents approximately 7 months' salary for the position.
You said the IT director is going to report to the school and work for the town?
Yes.
How does that work?
We currently share an IT department, and the director of the IT department and the assistant director of the IT department are both school employees.
Do you think it's realistic that that we're going to get 100% of this man's
I can tell you that
woman's
the Board
time?
of Selectmen voted unanimously, and the school has been informed that this position will be dedicated full-time to the town end of Pearl Street and not this end of Pearl Street.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Curtin?
It was a good question.
Jim Curtin, Precinct 4. I thought we already had an IT person for the town side. Did we not appoint one of these positions a couple of town meetings ago?
Ostensibly, we have an IT technician who takes care of our hardware needs primarily. I'm certain you've seen him kicking around the fire department from time to time. This is a position that's a higher level than that, and requires a much greater knowledge base, more especially regarding the software that the town uses and those kinds of needs. Like, for example, right now, the IT director, who is here tonight, spends an inordinate amount of his time providing support services to the police department, which has some pretty complex computer needs. And again, this position would allow him to spend more time at the school department, which is really where he's supposed to be and would be used, in every town department, and again, dedicated to the town side.
Okay, so we adding an IT position
This
to
would
the-
actually
to the
be an
town?
additional position, yes.
So we'd have 2 IT people on the town side?
Well, you would have one IT tech person.
And one director.
Who I think actually runs back and forth, but no town department head has complained about the level of tech support we get. But you would have this other person who would be a much higher level functioning person.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? If not, yeah, Mr. Rowe, you want to? I'm not used to seeing you sitting there.
I know. Good evening. I don't often advocate for a position. I don't think I really ever have. I did have one article I advocated for. You invested in some software, Munis financial software, $688,000. And it's a good thing because it's going to get the entire town on one system. Right now, I have to reconcile the KVS that the town has with Budget Sense, which the school has, with Treasurer who has QuickBooks, with the Public Works Department has Continental Utility. But we've told you all that before. But this person that would come in would be a Munis expert, so to speak, not just an expert in operating the system or data entry, but in training people. I can't tell you, I mean, many of the committee members know, and the board knows, and the manager knows that I've been, working many extra hours outside of business hours, which I don't mind. I love the job. I love the people I work with. I love the committee people. But you plan your day, you come to work, and you get a phone call. Bill, I can't do this. Bill, I can't do that. How do I do this? How do I do that? There's 15 minutes. Then you get an email. Bill, I'm having trouble doing this. How do I do this? You don't like to leave people hanging. You want to help them if you can. But before you know it, there's 3.5 hours out of your day that are gone helping people with Munis. And, most of the committee members know I'm way behind on the information, providing you folks with the information. And if I'm doing 55 to 60 hours a week, year-round, you should be getting the information faster. So this person would be very important to our office in getting the accounting information and getting the systems integrated. Right now, we're only doing general ledger and accounts payable. We're going with payroll January 1. You can mess up a vendor's bill. We don't like to do that. But you mess up on payroll, you're in trouble. And then July 1 of 16, we need to go for tax collection, personal property, real estate, and excise. So that's about all I have to say. I'd urge you to support that position. Thanks.
Mr. Laurie.
Okay, Dave Lurie, Precinct 6. Just a few months ago, we voted on this software package. My memory, what I remember is that it was about $750,000. I'm hearing a number tonight about $688. So there's, I guess, around $62,000 extra dollars difference between what's actual cost and what we voted on. My question was going to be, does the IT person you're hiring who's the expert on Munis, are we getting double what we're actually paying for? Because if we already have an expert consultant, then why do we need an IT director now if that person's already in place to absorb that extra $62,000? So
First off, there's not an extra
$62,000 plus $45,000
there is
over
not
7
an
months.
extra $62,000. The price that Bill quoted is just the price of the software. We said all along we had to bring in outside consultants. We had an outside consultant set up the whole chart of accounts. We had to unify the chart between the town and the school. So the entire $750,000 will be spent. There is a small amount left now, but I believe it's in the neighborhood of only $20,000 left.
So through you, Mr.
And it could not be used for employees, given the nature of the vote and the fact that it was in fact a borrowing means it can only be used for installation and purchase of the software and associated costs. It cannot be used for personnel.
So through you, Mr. Moderator, to the previous speaker, so when we voted for $750,000, we thought we were getting all the resources needed for Munis. Now we're being told that even though there's that $62,000 delta between actual software cost and the extra resources needed, we need another $45,000 that takes us another 7 months. So in actuality, it's $45,000 plus 62. I count that to be just over $100,000 more than what we thought we voted for just a few months ago. So that's why I'm not too thrilled with what I'm hearing, because we have already an expert and now we have to buy an IT director. So that's my concern.
If I could, I guess I don't understand your logic because you're mixing two unrelated items.
We voted, excuse me, Mr. Moderator, through you, what I remember voting for, and somebody can correct me, is that when we purchased $750,000, that we got all the resources needed for Munis. But now I'm hearing we need extra resources to handle Munis.
No,
so which is it?
You need extra resources to take care of the software needs of the town because given the current situation that the school department is in, they are unable to provide those services. Again, we have a shared IT department. We're not talking about the software. We're talking about an individual who will specialize in meeting the town's needs. The town has IT needs that are currently not being met because the school department is unable to provide that level of service, and that's why we requested this position. Originally, it was actually requested, the original request went to the Finance Committee from the Superintendent of Schools. The Board of Selectmen, like I said, modified it to say, no, this position will be dedicated to the town end.
Okay, excuse me, Mr. Moderator, my understanding is, and how IT works is that you have IT people who help you with equipment, networking, the nuts and bolts of getting the infrastructure in place so that you could run software. Then you have the software people. And when you pay $750,000 for a package, they better be bringing you everything you need to launch that software, including training, let alone implementation, database migration, all the things that it takes to actually operate software. So if this person, which we're paying for full-time, $45,000 over 7 months, plus more money for the following, what is that, another 4 months, 5 months, excuse me, then we didn't get everything that we said we were getting when we voted for $750,000. That's what I'm hearing.
Mr. McGee, would you?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Moderator. Hello, everyone. My name is Ryan McGee. I'm the IT director for the Towns and the Schools. What we've done is we've been working really hard to service all the needs, technology needs for the towns and schools. We work really hard. We're pushing forward. We do a lot of installations. We do a lot of software support, training, and so forth. The position would really help. We have implemented Munis. We're in the process of that. We're working through it. We have limited resources, and we really want to move the whole town forward in technology. So this position would be really helpful, not only to support Munis, but help on the town side. We have a whole team. We approach it as a team approach as a technology department. We have we have a nice skilled group of folks. We try to layer it. We all pitch in and help around the town. This additional position will help us continue to do that and grow stuff. We have server infrastructures we're still building out. We have lots of projects even beyond Munis, but Munis has occupied a large amount of time just training, getting people comfortable with the system, and making sure it's implemented properly. It's a huge investment. We want to be there to support it fully, and we want to be able to implement it and make sure it handles all the needs and abilities that it has.
I'm actually very good with understanding that the town may need IT. Once Munis is installed, once it's up and running, once everybody's trained in using it, we should have a reasonable IT department that's doing as much as they can during the hours that they're paid to work. When we voted for Munis, we were told that we were getting a complete installation all the way through to training. Why else would it cost $750,000? That's a lot of money for software. So when I hear that this person is going to be helping with implementing and doing all these steps to get Munis actually launched, that's what concerns me. We already paid the money when we voted a few months ago. We shouldn't have to be paying twice for the money that we already allocated. That's all I have to say.
Mr. Guerin?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. My questions were answered with the previous discussion.
I had a motion to move the question. All those in favor, cutting off debate, say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries. On the motion, I'll just restate it very briefly, and that's to appropriate the sum of $282,217 to supplement fiscal 2016 department budget expenses listed within this article, which you already see, and that to meet this appropriation, $82,878 be raised in the tax levy, and $184,803 be raised from fiscal 2016 water department revenue, and $14,536 be raised from fiscal 2016 sewer department revenue. This only requires a majority vote. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. All those opposed? No. Unless there's doubt. Okay, all those in favor, please rise and the chairman take account. Yep. Article 1, Precinct 1. Gee, so getting Precinct 1 is 7. Precinct 2. Precinct 2 is 11. Precinct 3. Precinct 3, you got 7. Precinct 4. 4 is 13. Precinct 5. Precinct 5 is 7. Precinct 6. Precinct 6. Precinct 6 is 7. Precinct 7. Precinct 7 is 7. And precinct 8. Precinct 8 is 3. All those opposed, please rise, Chairman, take count. Precinct 1. Precinct 1 is 4. Precinct 2. Precinct 2 is 2. Precinct 3. Precinct 3 is 2. Precinct 4. Precinct 4 is 0. Precinct 5. Precinct 5 is 0. Precinct 6. Precinct 6 is 1. Precinct 7. Precinct 7 is 0. Precinct 8. Precinct 8 is 1. Okay, how many you got?
That's so sad.
62 yes, 10 no. Is there,
That's so sad.
what's that? That, it looks like we're stuck to that point. So. Well, I would, at this point, the moderator can make a discretion, and it has been suggested that we come back on December 2nd.
I thought we blacked out the 23rd.
What day of the week is that?
I thought we blacked the 23rd out. November, next Monday.
What's that?
I thought we blacked out next Monday.
Wednesday the 2nd?
I know, I thought that's...
Wait a minute, there's a
Wait a
slight
minute.
problem, wait.
Or you want to do a...
Okay, shh, everybody be quiet, there's one little problem.
All right, one person at a time. Mr. Rowe, do you want to make a point?
Well, there's a list, these articles are part of the tax levy, and tax bills have to go out by December 31. Treasurer usually needs 3 weeks, sometimes 4, to get them ready after the tax rate is set by the DOR. DOR's lost like 7 field reps to early retirement, so it's getting a little dicey now. We had hoped to get it sent in this weekend, but it is what it is. I mean,
It's
gonna be a little tight.
The earliest day, you need to do it as fast as possible. So it has to be,
No,
it has to be next week then.
Well, why not, normally the procedure here is that the Board of Selectmen meet with the moderator, the town clerk, and see whether there is an agreeable date. With the schools, that's a bit, and, but we should,
I'll be here, but there'll be.
all right, I think that's the wisest thing. It's a Monday. Is that? This is a gamble. All right? These are the problems. All right? I asked that I'm going to, at this point, on the motion, to reconvene on Monday, the 23rd, at 7 PM, to continue this meeting, unless... Well, I believe the difference between our official business of this town takes priority over entertainment. And maybe this is entertainment. However, for the time being, if there is any reason to change that date, there is a procedure set by law as of last 7 o'clock. All right? And I ask the cooperation of each of the precinct chairmen to make a telephone call to remind those people who are not here that it is the 23rd. $10:52.